Chapter 1876. When Su Mei heard that, she looked at Yi Zichen and saw him nod at her. Buying time was a must. Xiao Yumei had hit the nail on the head. Their current alliance was to buy time. Given the god race's enmity with Ji Yuan, an alliance was nothing more than a pipe dream. Given Ji Yuan's current strength, it was impossible for him to defeat the god race. With the god emperor above him, it would take God King emotion and God King destruction quite some time to overthrow the alliance. What Ji Yuan needed to do was to take advantage of this opportunity to recuperate and build up his strength. See? Big sister was right, wasn't she? Xiao Yumei grasped Su Mei's hand and smiled warmly at her, then turned to Yi Zichen. The divine time artifact still has plenty of space and plenty of spiritual energy. Should we? That's exactly what I was thinking, said Yi Zichen confidently. The divine time artifact was the first era's greatest bargaining chip. It was a gift from the first era to the third era, the greatest opportunity to turn the tables on the god race. The flow of time within the artifact increased according to its wielder's strength. Back then, Xiao Yumei's cultivation was relatively high, and the flow of time was roughly stable at 1001. But now that Yi Zichen had transcended, and the divine artifact was his to wield, he was confident that there would be even more room to improve the flow of time. Then I'll erase the mark on the artifact and hand it over to you. It won't affect the people inside, will it? There were still many geniuses of the Yao and God race inside. If the divine artifact's new owner caused their comprehension to go awry, it'd be troublesome. I don't think so. Xiao Yumei pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. As its wielder, I have some sort of connection to the divine time artifact. If nothing unexpected happens, I'll erase the mark and hand it over to you. At most, the flow of time inside will fluctuate a bit. However, the spiritual energy inside and its Tao won't go haywire. His Tao will not go haywire, and they won't feel anything when they are in it. All right. In that case, give me the divine artifact. Xiao Yumei nodded solemnly and left. At the same time, Yi Zichen sent Sua Mo a message. Although they'd formed an alliance, that absolutely wasn't a reason for Ji Yuan to relax. Only by constantly improving one's own strength could one not panic when encountering unexpected situations in the future. Furthermore, Yi Zichen had just returned from the God realm. He knew full well that in the future, they might have to face more than just the God realm. The Milky Way galaxy was huge, and there were many races. The challenges would never end. Divine Palace. In front of the majestic palace, two godly kings of the God race, who held an important position in the God race, stood before the palace. However, the two God kings seemed to have encountered some trouble. They were mighty God kings, yet they were unable to even enter the hall. Lord Obes, Lord Yale. Surprisingly, there were two white-haired elders in front of the divine palace. Looking at the wings on their backs, one could tell that they were the experts of the Angel Clan, a special clan of the extraterritorial Divine Clan. The Divine Emperor is currently not in the palace. Please return, Divine Kings. In the end, Yale agreed to Orbis' words, or rather, he had this thought from the start. Unfortunately, when the two of them came to the Divine Palace, they did not see the Divine Emperor and were even given the cold shoulder. Moreover, the two of them did not dare to use violence against the two elderly angels in front of them. To be able to make the God Kings feel fear, it was because the two of them were eight-winged angels. If Yale's deity C had not been sealed, they could have barged into the Divine Palace without any resistance. However, Yale did not have divine power. With just the emotional God King, who was not good at fighting, it would not be easy for him to barge in. Emissaries, before I came, I heard the news that the Divine Emperor had returned and seemed to be injured, so I specially came to visit him. However, the two of you said that the Divine Emperor is not here. Isn't this a little? Lord Obes actually planted spies in the Divine Palace. The emotional God King's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly took a few steps back in fear. Since you didn't, how did you know that the Divine Emperor had returned to the palace and that the Divine Emperor was injured? The elderly angel smiled. The Divine Emperor is the number one person in this world. Who could possibly injure the Divine Emperor? Right now, the Divine Emperor is indeed not in the palace. Before he left, he asked us two old fellows to help him take a look at the Divine Palace. The Divine Emperor is indeed not in the palace. If the two of you really have something to discuss with the Divine Emperor, come back in a few days. Yes. The emotional God King did not dare to say anything else. He gave the Destruction God King a look and left. The two elderly angels standing in front of the palace looked at each other inexplicably. Their eyes flashed with a light sigh. We're leaving just like that? Yale frowned. What else can we do? Obes said with a sunken expression. Could it be that I have to argue with those two old fellows and continue to admit to planting spies around the Divine Palace? In other words, the Divine Emperor is indeed injured. Of course, and his injuries are very serious. Obes said. My subordinates said that when the Divine Emperor returned, he was carried back by the angel race. He had already lost his consciousness. After that, there were two 8-winged angels guarding the door. Then what are you and I afraid of? Heh! The emotional God King sneered. You want to barge in? Why not? Yale said. What are you going to use to barge in? Wait for this seat to barge in, then you can sit back and enjoy the fruits of my labor. If it succeeds, you will benefit greatly. If it fails, you can say that you are restricted by me? Yale, I was able to stand in the God race for so many years, not because of those two idiots. Obes looked deeply at Yale and said, Let's forget about our previous discussion. Let's wait for the angel race to leave the Divine Palace before making further plans. As soon as he finished speaking, Orbis left through space. Looking at the few chief gods already waiting at the border of the northern god race, Yale could not help but curse. Coward! The Divine Emperor being injured was definitely a rare opportunity for them. Just the angel race guarding the door had scared Obes to this extent. Yale snorted disdainfully. If not for his deity C being sealed, he would definitely take this opportunity to attack and overthrow the Divine Emperor's regime. Your Majesty! The sovereigns under Yale rushed over. When they saw Orbis leave and Yale's furious expression, they didn't dare to say anything or ask too many questions. Return to the Divine Palace. Thinking about how Obes let go of such a good opportunity, Yale was filled with anger. They still had to wait for the angel race to leave. If the angel race could leave, didn't that mean that the Divine Emperor was safe and sound? At that time, so what if they went? If the two of them worked together, would they even be a match for the Divine Emperor? They should not have cooperated with such a coward. Yale suddenly felt some regret. Why did he plead for Obes back then? Such an ally, it was better for the Divine Emperor to strangle him to death. However, a question lingered in Yale's mind. Chapter 1877. Divine Palace. At the end of the corridor was a bookshelf filled with books. From the outside, the bookshelf did not look special, but as long as one moved the books on the bookshelf, one would realize that there was a whole new world here. Behind the bookshelf, there was a room. The room reeked of blood, and one could see patches of black gold blood stains on the ground. Walking along the blood stains, one could see a person covered in blood lying on the bed in a narrow room. Beside the bed, there was an old man wearing a white robe. He had a basin of water by his hand, and he was constantly using a white cloth to wipe the blood off his body. Not long later, the ground was filled with blood-colored cloth. King, Emotion God King and Destruction God King have just arrived. At this moment, the person who appeared in the room was the old woman who guarded the door. She was slightly bent over, and the wings on her back were completely retracted. She looked no different from a normal person. Got it. The old man sighed, and the white cloth was still wiping the God Emperor's body. When the blood stains on his body were slightly cleaned, he realized the God Emperor's injuries were not light. The old woman in the room was horrified. From her point of view, the God Emperor's injuries were too severe. His shoulders, abdomen, and limbs it was covered with horrifying bloody holes. Fresh blood flowed out of the bloody hole, which was why the old man by the bed kept wiping his body. Lord God Emperor, I can only say that he is lucky. The old man sighed, and the white cloth in his hand turned from white to black gold. He threw it to the ground beside the bed, and a new cloth covered it. Fortunately, the injuries are not fatal. Although there are other energies tearing at his body, his realm is more solid, and he does not have any impure energy. However, his realm is more solid, and he doesn't have any modeled power. It won't be long before his power devours the other power in his body. But how did Lord God Emperor get so heavily injured? The old woman's eyes were filled with confusion. Let alone the Outerium celestial race, for any race. The God Emperor was the strongest in this world. He had always been the one hurting others, and she really could not think of anyone who could injure him to this extent. Did the God Emperor get plotted against by other planes? The old woman said. This was the only reason she could think of. The God Emperor might have been plotted against by other planes. The old man shook his head. I do not know. After a long time, he spat out these words. He didn't know what the Divine Emperor had experienced. Was it a plot, or did he really meet someone he couldn't fight against? He didn't know. He only knew that the Divine Emperor had asked him to pick him up not long ago. When the old man arrived at the place mentioned by the Divine Emperor, he saw the dying Divine Emperor, who seemed to have exhausted the last of his strength to spit out a few words, "Let's go." That was all the communication between the God Emperor and the old man. There was nothing else. It was also his idea to let the 2 8-winged angels guard the door. He guessed that the God King would definitely come to visit at this time. At this moment, the only people in the God clan that could make them feel slightly fearful were the 2 8-winged angels, who had already lived in seclusion. In fact, the old man really hoped that he was thinking too much. He didn't expect that they would really come. Sister, I'll have to trouble you and brother-in-law to stay for a few more days. The old man looked at the old woman with a sincere expression, his murky eyes filled with a myriad of thoughts. Sure. It just so happens that I have nothing to do with that person. The old woman smiled and didn't refuse. Then, she looked at the Divine Emperor, her eyes filled with worry. The Divine Emperor, how long will this state last? That depends on him. The old man sighed. Even though the old man was the king of the angel clan, he felt powerless in the face of the Divine Emperor's current situation. There seemed to be a dark power in his body. It was also this dark power that was wreaking havoc in his body, causing his injuries to be unable to stabilize. The power of the angel clan was the nemesis of darkness. But his holy power couldn't do anything to that dark power. This was a darkness that surpassed holiness. Moreover, this dark power didn't seem to have just invaded his body. It seemed to have existed in his body for countless years. The Angel King didn't have a deep personal relationship with the Divine Emperor. He didn't know what the Divine Emperor had experienced in the past for this darkness to remain in his body for so long. All right, then I'll leave you here. Don't worry. As long as I and that person are here, no one can step into the Divine Palace. The old woman left with a serious expression. The old man nodded at her and began to wipe the golden black blood off his body. The Divine Emperor is seriously injured. The Divine Emperor is seriously injured. Inside the Divine Palace of Destruction, there was no one except for the Divine King of Destruction, Yale, who was sitting in the hall. His mind was filled with this sentence. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If only the emotional Divine King had been a little stronger, even though there were 2 8-winged angels guarding the door and not letting them in. But these 2 angels were already in their twilight years. How could their holy power be a match for the emotional Divine King, who was in the prime of his life? The two of them could have ignored the two eight-winged angels and barged into the divine palace to investigate the divine emperor's specific situation. If the divine emperor wasn't as strong as they thought, they could say that they were worried about the divine emperor's safety. They couldn't ignore the divine emperor's safety and wanted to visit him to ask if he needed the divine medicine. If the divine emperor was really seriously injured to the point that he had lost consciousness, the eight-winged angels were guarding the door, so the ones guarding the divine emperor would at most be the angel king. At that time, he and the emotional divine king, the two great divine kings, would raise their arms and call for help. All the overgods under them would rush over and use the emotional divine king's emotional power to urge the overgods of the other two divine palaces. Yale hated it. He hated that his deity ocean was sealed. Such a good opportunity was wasted because of the emotional divine king, that coward. Why is the divine emperor so injured? Could it be that what Stark said was true? Yale couldn't help but frown. He couldn't help but recall what Stark said when he invited him to form an alliance and overthrow the regime. The divine emperor has a fatal weakness. The weakness is that he has long been eroded by a mysterious dark power. It will relapse 3 times a month. At that time, his realm will be less than 10%, and it will be very difficult for him to use his divine power. Could it be true? How long will this deity ocean seal take? Yale kept trying to activate the divine power in the deity ocean, but the connection between him and the deity ocean would be mercilessly cut off as soon as it was established. Damn it. Chapter 1878. The New Era. Old Lord Taishang's medicine was a great success. Regardless of whether they were Yao, demon, or god, after taking the medicine, no one infected by the reincarnators would become infected. As soon as the medicine circulated, the situation within the new era was under control. Under the disdainful efforts of the great emperors and era experts, those who had reincarnated from their mothers were all killed. However, what they felt after the end wasn't joy at surviving a calamity. Rather, it was unspeakable pain. After all, the reincarnators were all people from the new era. Most of them were the relatives and friends of the current survivors. Killing them meant they'd personally slaughtered their loved ones. Of them, the Ocean Emperor's situation was the worst. Zhou had to pass through the northern Divine Mountain before heading to the 10th Divine Mountain. The entire Shui clan was buried in his hands. This meant that the Ocean Emperor's siblings, nephews, and nieces, they'd all become targets of his purge. Over the past month, he'd practically wept. He was the only one who knew how tormented his heart was. Chaos City. The purge of the reincarnators was nearing its end. There was no need for the great emperors to personally take action. Coincidentally, the Master of the Stars had come looking for them. Instantly, all the major powers gathered in Chaos City. Star Lord Yi. They cupped their fists at Yi Zichen. They were currently on a plane. They were confused as to why he'd invited them to a place like this, but when they saw Yi Zichen, they still greeted him. No matter how close they'd once been to Yi Zichen, he'd transcended from the previous era. They couldn't just casually cross the line between them. Great Emperors, you've worked hard. Yi Zichen looked at the great emperors and smiled. Then, his gaze suddenly turned serious and he bowed deeply. Star Lord Yi, why are you? The great emperors were terrified. They didn't dare accept his bow. It's all thanks to the great emperors that the new era's internal strife was pacified. As the Emperor Star, I didn't do anything at all. I'm truly ashamed. Star Lord Yi, you're exaggerating. Not at all. This bow is only natural. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with unquestionable light. The other great emperors could only smile bitterly and nod. After a long while, Yi Zichen looked up. The great emperors might not know why I've gathered all of you here. The great monarch nodded. I want to announce something to everyone here. Not long ago, I went to the Outerium Celestial Race and discussed the matter of an alliance with the God Emperor of the Outerium Celestial Race. Alliance? The great emperors were shocked. Yes, an alliance. Yi Zichen nodded affirmatively. In the future, the god race will be allies in the era of war. It's just that. The great sovereigns all looked over, waiting for his next words. Forming an alliance is actually not that simple. What? Could it be that the Outerium god race has made a request of us? The Bai and Emperor snorted. Of course not. You've known me for so long, would I be the sort of person to sign an unfair contract? Yi Zichen couldn't help but smile wryly, then looked towards Xiao Yumei. Xiao Yumei took a few steps forward, then explained the internal situation of the god realm and the reason for their alliance to the great emperors. Only then did Yi Zichen speak. Finally, Yi Zichen said, "It's just as Yumei said, the god race has a lot of objections to the alliance. We don't know how long it'll last, but it'll buy us enough time. What we need to do during this time is continuously increase the era's overall strength." I agree with Star Lord Yi. Wei Chun of the White Tiger clan nodded. Compared to the Outerium god race, the current era is like a newborn baby in the prime of his life. We're truly too weak. For example, during the god race's previous attack, they didn't actually do anything to us, but we were already flustered. Fortunately, the god race had internal strife. Otherwise, it's hard to say whether the era of war would still be around. The great emperors all agreed with Wei Chen's words. Everyone here was a reasonable man. Although it seemed like Wei Chen was making the era of war sound completely useless, that was the truth. For example, great emperors like them, they might not even be as strong as a lord god from the outside. With such an obvious gap, if the Outerium god race continued to attack, it would be very difficult to defend against them. Buying time was the best news for them. Once we get back, there's no need to go back. At that moment, Yi Zichen snapped his fingers. Like a miracle, the plains transformed into a majestic city. I wonder if you've noticed? What? Actually, you're already inside the Time Divine artifact. Yi Zichen chuckled. When the great emperors heard this, their eyes widened. Yi Zichen continued, "The city before us is a manifestation of the Time Divine artifact. The Divine artifact's space is divided into 3 layers. The first layer flows at a rate of 2000 to 1, suitable for those under the diviner level. The middle layer is 5000 to 1, suitable for those under the divine general level. The top layer is 8000 to 1, suitable for emperor-level experts." The great emperors were stunned. 8000 to 1? What did that mean? Even though 1 day had passed in the outside world, 8000 days had passed in the inside world. This is the most stable time flow I can maintain right now. Once my cultivation improves, I might be able to go even higher. You should be able to go even higher. The great emperors truly didn't know what to say. Yi Zichen smiled and said, "Don't worry." Yi Zichen smiled and said, "In the future, this place will be preserved in the form of a city. Great emperors and your clansmen can come and cultivate here at any time. Based on my rough estimations, this city should have no problem holding a few billion people. This city contains my understanding of the Tao of heaven and earth after reaching transcendence. Perhaps my understanding isn't as deep as the great emperors, but if the great emperors don't understand anything before, it'll be much easier to comprehend it through my understanding." They were dumbfounded. It could hold billions of people, increase the flow of time by 2000, and even infuse the Tao of heaven and earth with it. Easy. The great sage hurried over on his auspicious cloud. Yi Zichen gestured for Yumei to take charge, then nodded to the great emperors and walked up to the great sage. "Yi, there's a girl looking for you." "A girl? Do you know her?" "I don't, but I've seen her before." The great sage arched his brows. "She's the northern god who follows Yale around." "It's her." At the mention of the northern god, Yi Zichen couldn't help but recall the strange look in her eyes when they first met. Chapter 1879. Outside Chaos City. A woman stood in the shadow of the towering city walls. Yang Jian stood beside her. Judging from their expressions, they didn't seem to be talking at all. This silence made Yang Jian feel somewhat awkward. Just as he was hoping someone would step in and help him out, he saw the great sage and Yi Zichen walk out of the city gate. As if he'd just seen his savior, Yang Jian walked up to them. Yi Zi. Although Yang Jian didn't say anything unnecessary, Yi Zichen could still see the awkwardness on his face. Now that he thought about it, it made sense. They weren't familiar with each other. Even if Yang Jian had a frivolous personality in the heavenly court, this woman was no ordinary person. Furthermore, the third princess was present, so he didn't dare flirt with other women. Neither of them said anything. It was only natural that they'd feel awkward just standing there. She nodded at Yang Jian, patted him on the shoulder, and smiled. Yi Zichen walked in front of the woman. The woman in front of him had many titles. She was the strongest female god of the outside god race, or rather, the strongest woman of the god race, the number one figure beneath the god king of destruction. With so many titles, she was the goddess of war. Her appearance astonished Yi Zichen. You could also say that anyone else from the god realm who showed up at this time would astonish him. Lord of the Epic Star. This time, the goddess of war didn't have the complicated emotions she'd felt when she first met Yi Zichen. She stood calmly in front of him, and her tone was even. Goddess of war. Yi Zichen nodded and got straight to the point. Goddess of war, why have you come to our epic? Could it be that the god king of destruction, whose divine sea is sealed, wants to send us a message through you? As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen continued. Don't tell me the god king of destruction wants to challenge us? He seems to like it that way. But the god emperor just announced his alliance with the epic star. Isn't this a bit inappropriate? You really have a lot to say, said the goddess of war. Everyone could sense Yi Zichen's expression freeze. Yang Jian was the first to see him in such a predicament. He fought to hold back his laughter until his face turned bright red. After a brief silence, the goddess of war said, I didn't come here because Yale told me to. I came here of my own volition. Is that so? I don't have that kind of time in the city. This time, the goddess of war interrupted Yi Zichen's flowers once more. Yi Zichen stood in front of the city gates, looking utterly embarrassed. Then he heard the goddess of war say, The god emperor is in trouble. If Star Lord Yi believes that an alliance with the god emperor is necessary, then take a few experts with you to the god emperor's divine imperial palace. We need your help. Suddenly Yi Zichen frowned. His Majesty is in trouble? This, who in the entire Milky Way galaxy could threaten the safety of the Emperor? Could it be that the Protoss had rebelled? With the God King of emotions around, stirring up the emotions of the people should be a piece of cake. However, the Divine Emperor had already spoken to such an extent. No matter how bold the emotional Divine King was, he wouldn't dare to do such a disgraceful thing. What would that be? He looked at the war goddess suspiciously. He had just left the Outer Realm's celestial race not long ago. Now, someone came to tell him that the Emperor was in trouble. They were from the Shrine of Destruction. Yi Zichen had always been on guard against the God's Palace of Destruction. Yale was a god king who enjoyed his life by destroying planes. He definitely wouldn't allow the alliance to continue. Now that the war goddess had come, could this be Yale's ploy? That's all I have to say. Whether or not you believe me is up to you, said the war goddess, sensing Yi Zichen's suspicion, but she couldn't be bothered to explain. Can you tell me exactly what happened to the divine light? The God Emperor is heavily injured and is being cared for by the Angel King and 2 8-winged angels. The God King of Destruction and God King of Emotions both want to overthrow the God Emperor's rule and are secretly plotting how to deal with him. Not long ago, Yale sent people to investigate the God Emperor's situation. Said the war goddess. Heavily injured. That was too much. Elder Lin had told him himself that the God Emperor was already the strongest expert in the world. No one could harm him. Now, he'd sold out 2 God Kings. For you to tell me this, isn't that a bit? Yizichin wanted to say something, but stopped himself. He was still testing the truth. You seem to be mistaken, Star Lord of the Epoch. From start to finish, I've been loyal to the God race. I've never been loyal to any one of them, much less any of the God Kings of the divine palaces, snorted the war goddess. Loyal to the God race. If that was the case, then the war goddess's words made sense. But that's all I have to say. Goodbye. Without giving Yizichin a chance to speak, the war goddess cupped her fists and left. Her departure was just as silent as her arrival. Yang Jian and the great sage had no idea where the war goddess had gone. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air in the first place. At that moment, an inexplicable question popped into Yizichin's mind. Does the Epoch Lord of the Epoch have any children? Yizichin narrowed his eyes when the question popped up in his sea of consciousness. He knew the war goddess was asking him this, but he didn't know why. No, replied Yizichin. Before long, however, he added, I don't have any biological children, but I have a daughter with Yume in the modern realm. His response was like a stone sinking into the ocean. It was as if the war goddess had never asked this question at all. After Yizichin answered, he wondered if he was hallucinating or out of sorts. In the end, the war goddess had left. She hadn't said anything unnecessary. Yizi, are we going? Asked the great sage. Yizichin didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lowered his eyes and thought for a while. Could this be Yale's sinister plot? But if it was true, and the God Emperor was seriously injured, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Right now, the God Emperor was needed to maintain the alliance between the Epoch and the God race. After much thought, it seemed that this trip to the God race was absolutely necessary. We have to go. Yizichin muttered to himself for a moment, then glanced at the great sage and Yang Jian. But you can't go. Everything on this trip is unknown. The God Kings of the Outer Realms aren't something you can stand up against. On this trip, I'll bring the venerable of numinous treasure and… Before he could finish speaking, holy light illuminated the sky above Chaos City. Yizichin and company immediately noticed the blinding light and looked over. Before long, the light faded slightly, revealing a female angel with 4 wings on her back. May I ask if you're the Epoch Lord of the Epoch? Chapter 1880. Your Majesty. Yale, who was sitting on the throne, gestured for the chief god in the hall to keep quiet. The chief god didn't understand, but he saw Yale give him a look. There was someone else in the hall. Who would dare to eavesdrop in the God of Destruction Palace? If they were discovered, with the power of the God of Destruction Palace, even the God King wouldn't let them off easily. Yale's deity ocean was still sealed, so the chief god in the hall could only let him spread his divine sense to every corner of the hall and carefully investigate the surrounding situation. No one. This was the result of this chief god's investigation. He shook his head at the God King, indicating that there was no one else in the hall. Yale frowned deeply. Not long ago, he had clearly felt that there was someone else in the hall. However, there were no other chief gods around him, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Could it be that this person had already left? All right, you can continue. Yes. The chief god's expression froze. With a flip of his hand, a handful of soil stained with black gold and a bit of blood appeared in his palm. I followed your instructions and went to the surroundings of the Divine Emperor Palace. This is the evidence that I found of the God King's injuries. Yale waved his hand lightly, and the chief god carefully sent the soil over. He pinched the soil with his fingers and put it in front of his nose. The smell of blood. He then checked the color of the soil. It was indeed a bit dark, and this kind of darkness inexplicably made his heart palpitate. One had to know that this was just a handful of soil with blood. The darkness that was left on it had already dried up, but even so, it still made him feel a little flustered. Stark didn't lie to him. The God King really had hidden injuries. Yale waved his hand to signal for the chief god to leave, then frowned. Why isn't the war goddess here yet? Your Majesty, you were looking for me? Before Yale finished speaking, a beautiful woman appeared in front of the hall. She took a few steps to the front of the hall, her eyes full of solemnity. This was her usual style when facing Yale. She always had a solemn face. You, seeing the war goddess appear, Yale's brows sank even deeper. Why did you take so long? Where did you go before? I went to the Divine Emperor Palace. The war goddess placed her hand in front of her chest and bowed deeply. Please forgive me for delaying your summons, Your Majesty. Divine Palace. Yale's frown deepened. Everyone in the hall could feel the atmosphere gradually becoming heavy. Yes. The war goddess nodded. Why are you going to the Divine Palace? When you came back from the Divine Emperor Palace, I noticed that you didn't look well. I thought that something might have happened on the way and wanted to help you, so I went to the Divine Emperor Palace. Then what did you discover? No problem. Yi Zichen was surrounded by experts on this trip to the outside. He was accompanied by Gu Xuanda, his wife Qingli, the numinous treasure sovereign, and the elder by Su Mei Er's side. All of them were half-step transcendence experts. Although they were a bit weaker than the God King, they weren't that far off. Yi Zichen gestured for the Angel King not to take it to heart. The ambitious bastards you mentioned just now, but I only suspect. The Angel King didn't insist that Yale and the others were traitors. No matter what, we need to ensure the God Emperor's safety. Then the God Emperor. His condition has stabilized considerably, but we still don't know when he'll wake up, said the Angel King. Do you know how the God Emperor got so heavily injured? I don't. The Angel King shook his head. We'll have to wait until the God Emperor wakes up, then ask him yourself. Cough, cough, cough. At that moment, the God Emperor suddenly coughed violently. Chapter 1881. As the God Emperor slowly opened his eyes, everyone in the room couldn't help but hold their breaths. His pale face was no longer as imposing as before. Even though he was the God Emperor, right now, he was nothing more than a heavily injured patient who just regained consciousness. The Angel King let out a sigh of relief and dispersed the holy light in his hand. He took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat from his face. He'd used up a lot of energy. In the past few days since the God Emperor's return to the Divine Palace, the Angel King hadn't stopped using his holy power to heal him. Although he was powerful, he was already in his twilight years. While he was healing, he needed to keep his holy power within a suitable range. Even the Angel King felt exhausted after being in such a tense state for so long. Your Majesty, please don't torment my old bones in the future, said the exhausted Angel King with a sorrowful smile. You've worked hard. As soon as he finished speaking, the Divine Emperor seemed to want to sit up from the bed. Unfortunately, he'd just woken up from his heavy injuries, so his body was still weak. He tried several times to sit up straight but failed. Yi Zichen noticed this and walked up to him. He supported the God Emperor's back and helped him lean against the headboard. I didn't think you'd alarm the Master of the Stars. The God Emperor nodded and thanked Yi Zichen, then glanced at his weak aura. How embarrassing to let so many people see my miserable state. What's the big deal about that? How can you walk by the river without getting your shoes wet? For better or for worse, I'm the Master of the Emperor's Star. They've seen me in such a miserable state, haven't they? Sometimes they even tease me about it, but I'm still fine, aren't I? You don't have to worry about them telling anyone else. I swear to you, only the people in this room will know about this. My people will absolutely keep it to themselves. If word gets out. Yi Zichen's companions didn't say anything. They knew full well that this wasn't the time for them to speak. Furthermore, even if they were major powers, the peak of their era, but they'd come to the outside with Yi Zichen. With the Transcendence era present, they shouldn't be the ones to discuss the situation with the God Emperor. However, they were also curious as to how the Divine Emperor could be so heavily injured. "This king doesn't like idle chatter," the Angel King said. "Haha, look at what you're saying. I didn't mean that." Yi Zichen grinned, then pointed at the room. "What I'm trying to say is, if outsiders find out, all they can say is that there's something wrong with the Divine Emperor's palace." The people in the room were all people who had lived for tens of thousands of years. There was no need to say anything else. They already knew what Yi Zichen was trying to say. The Divine Emperor, in particular, frowned slightly after hearing this. "The Divine Palace is not like the other Divine Palaces. Those who can enter the Divine Palace are my trusted aides. Star Lord Ye's worries are unwarranted." "If that's the case, how did the God Kings learn of your heavy injuries in just a few hours?" The Divine Emperor said nothing. He subconsciously glanced at the Angel King. Seeing the Angel King nod, the Divine Emperor on the bed patted the edge of the bed with both hands. His divine sense shook and instantly covered the entire Divine Palace. Then, he shrunk his divine sense to the size of a room and sealed the entire room. "That's absolutely impossible." It was just as the Divine Emperor had said. Only his trusted aides could enter the Divine Palace. Their identities had been thoroughly investigated, and only after confirming that they weren't tainted by the other God Kings had they been allowed to enter the Divine Palace. The Angel King and Star Lord Epic both told him that news of his heavy injuries had been leaked. "You don't need to make such an arbitrary decision. The truth is right in front of you. The God King of Emotion and the God King of Destruction really did come here, and they clearly learned of your injuries. Of course, it's entirely possible that they didn't come from within your Divine Palace. It's also possible that other God Kings planted spies around your palace." "They're spies," said Yi Zichen. "How dare they?" The Divine Emperor angrily slammed his hands on the bed. In his fury, his limbs moved so much that the wounds he'd just managed to scab over started tearing again. "Divine Emperor!" In practically an instant, the Angel King unleashed his holy power and shone it on the Divine Emperor's wounds. "These people are too impudent. They even have the gall to plant spies right under my nose? It seems they're up to no good." A solemn atmosphere enveloped the entire room. Although the Divine Emperor's body was very weak now, the dignified aura he'd gained only because he'd been in a high position for a long time now flowed uncontrollably from his body. Right now, he was like a wounded lion that was enraged, even though he was severely injured. Even though his injuries were severe, the animals around him didn't dare do anything to him. In the face of the Divine Emperor's rage, Yi Zichen merely smiled but said nothing. Good intentions? Naturally, the God King of Emotion and the God King of Destruction didn't. If what the War Goddess said was true, then the two God Kings were secretly plotting how to overthrow the Divine Emperor and usurp his throne. Yi Zichen knew this, but he didn't say it aloud. Planting spies had already made the Divine Emperor so angry. If he revealed this information, the Divine Emperor might actually cough up blood. After a long while, the Divine Emperor finally calmed his fury. "My lack of discipline has caused Star Lord Yi to laugh at me. Divine Emperor, you're too kind. It's just planting spies. It's pretty common. I've experienced it too many times," laughed Yi Zichen. The God Emperor didn't comment. The Angel King, who just stopped the scab from bursting open, retracted his hand. "Your Majesty, please don't cause trouble." His tone was stern and admonishing. "You should know your body's condition better than anyone else. If you tear open your wounds again, the consequences will be unimaginable." "I understand," sighed the Divine Emperor. Yi Zichen looked back and forth between the Angel King and the Divine Emperor. He sensed something fishy was going on, but the Angel King had some misgivings and hadn't said everything. Yi Zichen licked his lips. Since he was already here, there were some things he naturally had to get to the bottom of, even if it could be troublesome. But the Divine Emperor was already heavily injured. His injuries meant that the events behind his back could affect the entire era, including the planet he'd once lived on. Yi Zichen absolutely couldn't let that happen. Your Majesty, there's something I don't understand. Chapter 1882. The Divine Emperor pretended to laugh frivolously, but no one else in the room could laugh. His words proved how serious the problem he was about to talk about was. It wasn't as simple as trouble. Yi Zichen rubbed the tip of his nose. To tell the truth, Yi Zichen wanted to retreat a bit. The higher his realm was, the more he felt that he was not in control of the entire situation. Instead, he felt more and more responsibility, and he felt more and more insignificant. The universe was too big. What he had encountered so far was merely an outworld celestial race. There were still many planes and races outside, and these races had the ambition to attack the divine race. If they wanted to attack, it meant that they had the strength to do so. Only when they were strong enough would they have such thoughts. If Yi Zichen went back and told the great emperors that he wanted to attack the outside realm and fight them to the death, he was sure that 80% of them would say that he didn't. Crazy. Therefore, he became more and more cautious, and he didn't like trouble. He was well aware of his own capabilities and knew that his abilities were limited. He did not want to get involved in matters that were beyond his capabilities. However, when he looked at Gu Xuanda and the others, he saw anticipation and curiosity in their eyes. They wanted to know what the Divine Emperor was going to say next. What's more, Yi Zichen had already made a decision that he wanted to know, and they were looking forward to it. Then I'll risk my life to accompany the gentleman. He nodded at the Emperor with determination in his eyes. The Emperor seemed to smile with relief, and the others in the room were all ready to listen. My injuries came from the eternal mystic realm. What? Universe secret region? The Angel King cried out almost as soon as the Emperor's voice trailed off. The exaggerated expression on his old and steady face looked very uncoordinated. It was obvious that he knew about the universe mystic realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so shocked. In contrast, when Yi Zichen heard about the secret realm of the universe, his expression was blank. Whether it was the Venerable of Lingbao, the Gu couple, or the old man beside Su Mei'er, they were all unfamiliar with this term. God Emperor, you aren't joking, right? A universe secret realm appeared here? The Angel King stared and frowned. The Divine Emperor nodded slightly, and the Angel King got up from the bed. After the words universe secret realm appeared, his actions became even more exaggerated. Even if Yi Zichen and the others didn't know what a secret realm was, they could guess from the Angel King's body language. How is this possible? The Angel King, who had circled the room several times, stopped and looked at the Emperor with bright eyes. Isn't this the Milky Way galaxy forged by the Milky Way Master? Since it's a forged object, it proves that it has no way to connect to the universe. Naturally, the secret realm of the universe wouldn't appear here. Maybe this is the greatness of the Milky Way Master. Actually, thousands of years ago, the Milky Way forged by the Lord was recognized by the universe and connected to it. You can ask Star Lord Yi about this. The planet he once lived on has also discovered that there are other galaxies outside the Milky Way galaxy. Yes. Star Lord Yi. The Angel King looked towards Yi Zichen. Actually, Yi Zichen was a bit confused as well, but he still nodded. Then, he pointed at the emotional elder. The King of Angels is one of the few survivors of the Milky Way. After the Lord forged the Milky Way, he has been living here. In fact, in the current Milky Way galaxy, there are still many races that are survivors of the former Milky Way galaxy, the Emperor explained. Impossible. How is this possible? The Angel King couldn't help but pace around the room. It was clear that he was very anxious. That sort of anxiety was very noticeable on a big shot like him. King of Angels, the situation might not be as bad as you think. But it's definitely not optimistic, right? Said the Angel King. The Emperor didn't refute that. After a long time without receiving any response from the Shunhuang, who looked like an old man in his 80s or 90s, paced back and forth in the room like a young man who couldn't make up his mind, mumbling something that no one else could hear. The Emperor could only shrug and smile at the Angel King's reaction. God Emperor, shouldn't you tell us more about this universe secret realm? What's going on? The one who spoke was Gu Xuanda. Although he knew very well that he, a half-step transcendence cultivator, had no right to speak in front of the Emperor, Angel King, and Star Lord Ji, he still spoke up. He couldn't help but want to know just what kind of existence a secret realm of the universe was. Do you still want to know now? The Emperor smiled. I'm giving you a chance. There are some things you know that might be a huge burden on you. No one said anything, but the determination in their eyes was clear. Yi Zichen was among them. He cared too much. Just what kind of existence was a secret realm of the universe? Why did the Angel King lose his composure after learning about it? Just what kind of story was hidden behind it? Both Yi Zichen and the others wanted to know too much. You might really regret your decision. The God Emperor sighed, then smiled. He reached out and pointed at Yi Zichen. Especially you. You'll definitely regret it, but I won't give you the chance to. None of you will. A secret realm of the universe is actually a secret treasury of the universe. I trust that your era has secret realms as well, right? You'll definitely find resources that will help you grow stronger. Perhaps it's pills, perhaps it's weapons and armor, or perhaps it's talisman puppets and other treasures that can help you grow stronger. However, treasures and danger often coexist in secret realms. Obtaining treasures isn't easy. The others nodded. Among them, Yi Zichen understood this the best. Right now, the Upheaval Alliance controlled virtually all of the secret realms in the lower land. It was precisely because of their control that they had so many resources. The same is true for secret realms of the universe. Comparatively speaking, these secret realms are much larger than your eras, and the treasures inside are of much higher quality. The dangers inside are also greater, and the situation is more perilous. It's just like your era's secret realms. Danger and supreme treasures coexist. If you're lucky, you might be able to obtain a treasure inside and become the ruler of this universe. Chapter 1883. Yi Zichen finally understood why the White Messenger King had such a worried expression. The Master of the Milky Way was able to use the spear from a secret realm to become the #1 expert in countless galaxies. This naturally had a lot to do with his talent and hard work, but the spear was also a great help to him. The appearance of such a treasured land would definitely attract races from other galaxies. They would enter the secret realm in search of good fortune. The secret realms were connected, which meant that the races that entered would very likely come to the Milky Way galaxy forged by the Master of the Milky Way. If the races that came were friendly, and if the ones that came were from the Tsangue galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy would face a calamity. How is it? Do you regret knowing all this? On the bed, the God Emperor narrowed his eyes into a line. Naturally, he saw the expressions and changes in the expressions of the epic experts in the room. Anyone could sense the heavy atmosphere in the room when he said those words. Regret? To be honest, no one dared to say they didn't. They knew that races from other galaxies could enter the Milky Way galaxy through a secret realm. In other words, from now on, they would have to live a life of fear and trepidation, never to end their days. They would have to constantly worry about the influx of races from beyond the Milky Way galaxy, and worry about the consequences. That's why I said I hate trouble. Even before the God Emperor told him the truth, Yi Zichen had warned himself not to panic too much. However, the moment he said it, the heaviness in his heart spread throughout his body. Can I pretend I don't know anything? If I can, I'll take my people and leave right now. Era Yuan is pretty busy, and there's a bunch of things waiting for me to deal with, said Yi Zichen. Do you think that's possible? The God Emperor asked, then smiled at Yi Zichen. In truth, even if the Angel King hadn't called him over, the God Emperor was prepared to tell him everything after he woke up. Yi Zichen, in the eyes of both the God Emperor and Elder Lin, Yi Zichen was the only possibility within the Milky Way galaxy. In the future, he would have to stand beside the Master of the Milky Way and face the existences from other galaxies, as well as the enemies from beyond. What the God Emperor didn't expect was that everything would happen so quickly. Although he could not go to the side of the Milky Way Master now, in the near future, he would come into contact with the races outside the Milky Way galaxy. From the Emperor's smile, one could tell that it was impossible. Not long ago, he was trapped in a big pit by them. Fortunately, the pit was relatively far away from him, so he could still live his life comfortably. Alright then, in less than half a month, an even bigger pit appeared, and he even jumped into it himself. He really doubted what his brain was thinking just now. Why was his curiosity so strong? Yi Zichen smiled wryly and sighed. As he sighed, the God Emperor knew that Yi Zichen had accepted his fate. Little did they know, it was just as the God Emperor thought. Yi Zichen had indeed compromised. The planet he dreamed of returning to was in an era, and the era was in the Milky Way. If there was a problem with the Milky Way galaxy, the era would also have a problem, and the planet he lived on would not have a good ending. When the nest is overturned, no eggs remain intact. Yi Zichen understood this very well. When faced with the threat that the Milky Way galaxy was about to face, he would not shirk his duty. You and Elder Lin can trick me. Fine, I'll admit defeat. Right now, I'm in an era. Keep an eye on my people and make sure they get stronger as quickly as possible, so that when the Milky Way galaxy is attacked, they can contribute a bit of their strength. Yi Zichen's scalp was numb. He didn't know what to say to Yume and the others. Not long ago, he'd just told them that their current efforts were for the sake of the future era's survival against Yale and the others. Now, he had to go back and tell them that the mission objective had been upgraded. In the future, they'd have to face races beyond the Milky Way galaxy, and that their mission was to protect the universe. Bullshit? When they heard this, they'd be completely dumbfounded. No! To his surprise, the God Emperor rejected Yi Zichen's idea. Yi Zichen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Why was the God Emperor rejecting him? Did he think that the people of an era were too weak? Even if he gave them time, they wouldn't be able to contribute their strength to the Milky Way galaxy? Wasn't that a bit looking down on them? Although our era's overall strength isn't enough, we're all absolutely hot-blooded and righteous people, said Yi Zichen. That's not what I meant, the God Emperor waved his hand. It's only natural for them to increase their strength as quickly as possible. Before long, I'll also help my clansmen increase their cultivation levels as quickly as possible. But you can't leave. Are you afraid I'll run? Yi Zichen raised his eyebrows. That's what I was thinking, the God Emperor laughed heartily. The God Emperor laughed heartily. Who knows if you will forget about the universe's secret realm the moment you return to the epoch. But that's not the main reason. Not only can you not return, but the people around you can't either. If possible, it's best if you gather all the people on your side. Those with similar strength to them, find me. What do you mean? Yi Zichen didn't understand. Bringing all of the era's experts to the God realm would inevitably weaken the era's defenses. If Yale and the others attacked the era now, the consequences would be dire. Star-Lord Yi, you should know that if other races discover the Milky Way galaxy and enter, we'll be forced into a passive position, said the God Emperor solemnly. The God Emperor's gaze was solemn. The overall strength of the Milky Way galaxy is definitely behind the other galaxies in the universe. When they entered the Milky Way galaxy, they discovered if they enter the Milky Way galaxy and discover its hidden resources, they'll definitely plunder the Milky Way galaxy. That was right. Both Yi Zichen and Gu Xuanda understood this. A man's wealth was his own ruin. When what you possess is not equal to your own strength, those who are above you will naturally plunder what you possess. But what could they do if they didn't come in? Could they? At that moment, the God Emperor's eyes flashed with a sharp light. That's why I'm prepared to take the initiative. Our people will occupy the Milky Way galaxy's passageway ahead of time. Then we'll use our fiercest methods to force them back. Take the initiative to attack? This kind of retreat in order to advance was a way to avoid disaster for the current Milky Way galaxy. However, the problem was that they weren't strong enough. There's still plenty of good fortune in the secret realm. We can use it to strengthen ourselves and ensure that the passageway isn't discovered by other races. Star-Lord Yi, what do you think? Me? Chapter 1884. Danger lurked in every corner of the secret realm. Whether it was the danger of the secret realm itself or the possibility of races from other galaxies appearing within, rationality warned Yi Zichen not to make an impulsive decision. Rationality wasn't wrong, but sometimes rationality was the biggest stumbling block. Push yourself to the edge of death. The God Emperor had already said that the Milky Way galaxy's overall strength was inferior to that of the other galaxies. If other races entered the Milky Way galaxy, plundering resources was the best option. Destroy, the God Emperor hadn't said anything about this hidden threat, but everyone understood. Take the initiative to face the enemy and use battle to fuel battle. Explore the secret realm, obtain good fortune, strengthen oneself, and prevent other races from entering the Milky Way galaxy through the secret realm. It seemed dangerous and crazy, but it was definitely worth a try. When he heard Yi Zichen's reply, the God Emperor and Yi Zichen looked at each other and laughed. They both saw what they wanted to see in each other's eyes. Their gazes met, and they both understood that they were on the same side. It's just that, God Emperor. Yi Zichen's laughter didn't last for long. That's true, but there are still some things I need to ask you before I can make a decision. Speak. Your wounds. Yi Zichen pointed at the God Emperor's still unhealed wounds, his gaze solemn. I want to participate, and I'm willing to contribute my meager strength to the Milky Way galaxy. But you're already so badly injured in the secret realm. I'm just a half-assed transcendence cultivator. I'm afraid I'll lose my life if I go. And the people around me, I agree with your crazy decision, but we must also consider their safety. For our safety. Star-Lord Yi Qingli, Gu Xuanda, and the others were visibly moved. In truth, from the moment they decided to follow Yi Zichen to the new era, they'd handed the decision over to him. He hadn't acted arbitrarily. Now that Yi Zichen was actually thinking about them first, they couldn't help but feel warm inside. Yi Zichen smiled at Qingli and the others, then looked back at the God Emperor and waited for his reply. Star-Lord Yi truly understands his subordinates, said the God Emperor. They aren't my subordinates. Not long ago, they were my seniors and seniors, said Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen refused to acknowledge that he was the God Emperor's subordinate. Even now, I'm just lucky to have crossed that chasm in cultivation. Please don't avoid the important and dwell on the trivial, Your Majesty. Your reply. Was your injury caused by the universe's secret realm, or was it caused by encountering other races in the secret realm and fighting with them? This is very important. This time, even the Angel King stopped pacing and stared at the Emperor on the bed. The Divine Emperor's reply was very important to them. If even a God Emperor ended up in such dire straits, never mind Gu Xuanda and the others, even Yi Zichen would die if he went in. If the Divine Emperor ran into other races, they needed to consider whether the other races had left any imprints on the God Emperor's body. Was the Milky Way galaxy safe now? Would other races come to the Milky Way galaxy through the passage? Neither. Suddenly, the Divine Emperor gave an answer that everyone found hard to believe. How was this possible? The God Emperor's injuries were not fake. The Angel King could prove this. When the God Emperor had just returned, he had been severely injured. Even now, his injuries were still severe. Everyone in the room could see it. He had also returned from a universe secret realm, but the source of his injuries wasn't from the universe secret realm, nor was it from any other race. Then how did his injuries come about? Could it be that he had sneezed, tripped over his right foot, and accidentally tripped in the void? Did he just happen to land on a hedgehog-like floating object and leave countless holes in his body? God Emperor, that's no fun. Yi Zichen shook his head. He thought the God Emperor was deliberately hiding something. What is it? I'm telling the truth, said the God Emperor. The universe's secret realm is indeed dangerous, but the truly dangerous places are the ones with the most precious treasures. Just now I said that opportunity and danger coexist. I didn't go in search of treasures, so I naturally didn't encounter anything particularly dangerous. I didn't go in search of treasures. But your injuries are right there for all to see. Yi Zichen raised his voice. He really didn't get it. At a time like this, there was no point in hiding anything. The God Emperor wanted to pull him on board, but he didn't want to tell him everything. What was going on? Everyone could sense Yi Zichen's fury. The Angel King patted him on the shoulder in an attempt to calm him down. When the God Emperor saw the fury in Yi Zichen's eyes, he arched his brows and smiled. Do I have to be injured in a universe secret realm? Then tell me, who in the Milky Way can hurt you? There's no need for you to bring him here. I'll go see for myself, said Yi Zichen. Right now, no one in the Milky Way can hurt me. Look, Yi Zichen was so angry he wanted to laugh. He shrugged and nodded repeatedly. If the God Emperor has no intention of cooperating, then I don't think there's any need for us to continue this conversation, said the God Emperor, who was leaning against the headboard, calmly. Faced with Yi Zichen's fury, the God Emperor leaned against the headboard and said unhurriedly, "This injury was actually left behind when the Lord of Blue Moon attacked the Milky Way. I've been using my power to suppress it, but it still comes back every 100 years. I've always used my strength to suppress it, but it still comes back every 100 years. The previous injuries were relatively minor. This time, it's just more serious." The God Emperor looked into Yi Zichen's eyes and chuckled. In truth, you could say it was caused by the universe secret realm. Back then, in order to suppress my old injuries, I didn't even have 1/10 of my strength left. Coincidentally, a rock from the outside floated into the universe secret realm. The turbulence of the universe secret realm almost caused me to get lost. This injury was left behind while I was trying to escape. Of course. No wonder I felt like the power inside you had existed for a long time, said the Angel King. It was the Angel King's words that indirectly proved the authenticity of the Emperor's words. I can assure you that the universe secret realm is very dangerous, but so long as you don't touch the most precious treasures, even half-step transcendent or over-gods should be able to deal with them. That's why I asked you to send more experts over. With me here, I won't let them go either. So long as I'm here, I won't let them fall into danger. Chapter 1885. Following the alliance between the gods and the First Era, the Divine Palace dropped yet another bombshell. A secret realm connected to thousands of galaxies had appeared 15,000 kilometers outside the God realm. Unlike before, news of the secret realm's existence hadn't been announced to the world. Instead, it only circulated among the higher-ups of the God realm. Only overgods and above were privy to this information. Everyone was at a loss when they heard the unfamiliar term, secret realm. Whether it was a secret realm with precious treasures or other galaxies outside of the Milky Way galaxy, they were all shocking news to them. Elder Lin, I'll leave this trip to you. The God Emperor's aura was weak as he looked at the old man beside him. News of the secret realm had naturally alarmed the King of the Laws. He'd brought several Lords of the Laws with him to the outside, including Lin Ru, whom Yi Zichen was familiar with. When he'd heard about the secret realm, Elder Lin was utterly shocked. He'd never have guessed that the Milky Way galaxy, forged by the Milky Way God himself, would receive the universe's approval and open the door to the secret realm within. To him, the secret realm's appearance put enormous pressure on him. After hearing the God Emperor's decision, Elder Lin mulled it over for a moment before agreeing. Given the current situation, they couldn't just sit around and wait for death. Taking the initiative to prevent the other universes from directly entering the Milky Way galaxy might be the best solution for them. Leave it to me. Elder Lin's forceful voice reverberated throughout the room. It had been nearly a week since the God Emperor returned from the secret realm. Even so, the Divine Emperor's injuries showed no signs of recovery. His face was always pale, and when he spoke, his voice was weak and listless. His eyes were dark, his cheekbones were protruding, and his muscular body was nowhere near as muscular as before. During this time, the Angel King had been by his side the entire time. He understood the God Emperor's condition better than anyone else. That terrifying darkness energy was still wreaking havoc in the God Emperor's body. Elder Lin glanced at the God Emperor on the bed, his eyes filled with even greater regret. In the entire Milky Way galaxy, he understood the God Emperor the most. He naturally knew the God Emperor's injuries better than anyone else. Elder Lin patted the Divine Emperor's shoulder lightly and did not remind him to take care of his rest, which was of no importance. After I leave, you must keep a close eye on the news, no matter if it's to the other planes or— Elder Lin's voice suddenly stopped, and he shot the Divine Emperor a meaningful glance. They had been partners for billions of years, so there was no need for words to be said. The Divine Emperor instantly understood what Elder Lin wanted to express. Don't worry, those little fellows don't have the ability to shake this Emperor's position. Anyway, just be careful. Before coming here, I made a trip to the God of Destruction Palace and completely sealed Yale's divine sense without him knowing. Elder Lin said. Sorry to trouble you. The Emperor smiled with a pale face. Then, he lay down on the bed and waved his hand. This Emperor is a little tired. All of you should hurry up and leave. This Emperor is here with the God race. You can rest assured. With that, the Emperor God closed his eyes and no longer looked at anyone in the room. The Angel King and Elder Lin looked at him, then at each other. After nodding slightly, the Angel King took half a step back and made an inviting gesture. Elder Lin left the room with the Angel Monarch following closely behind. However, not long after they left, the Emperor God opened his eyes again, lifted his blanket, and looked at his leg. No one knew that his right leg was currently covered in black mist, and most of the skin and flesh on his leg had been completely corroded. Just from the visual impact, one could tell what kind of pain the Emperor God was enduring. However, he had a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't take all of this to heart. After a few more glances, he covered himself with the blanket again and snorted disdainfully. That's all you've got? This Emperor thought you could directly take my life. When Elder Lin and the rest left the God Palace, many people had already gathered outside. These people were all experts above the Lord God level. Some of them held positions in the God Palace of the 4 God races, while others were elites from the major clans. All of them came here voluntarily. This time, the Emperor God didn't force them to go. The God race also needed people to defend. The other planes had been eyeing the God race covetously. If they sent out all their elites, the other planes might take this opportunity to attack the God race. Ruler of the laws. The experts cupped their fists at Elder Lin, then nodded at the newcomers. Their eyes flashed, and their thoughts raced. There weren't many people here, but they were absolutely trustworthy. If nothing out of the ordinary happened, everyone here was most likely curious about the secret realm. Of course, that didn't rule out the possibility that some people with ulterior motives had come with them to pass on information to the God race. Just now, Elder Lin had used their gazes and their series of actions to understand their thoughts. Is that all? No, Ji-Yuan, Yi-Zichen, and the others haven't arrived yet. Lin Ru blinked and looked around, but didn't see Yi-Zichen anywhere. At the mention of Yi-Zichen, she clenched her fists. She'd been in the first era for so long. Yi Zichen hadn't even glanced at her. No matter what, they were good friends. She'd disregarded everything to stand by his side countless times, especially back in the immortal, demon, and demon realms. She'd been locked up. This guy had stayed in Chaos City ever since returning to the first era. He hadn't even brought her any good news. "Is Ji Yuan coming with us as well?" asked someone from the Divine Palace of Liberty. Their grudge against Ji Yuan was undoubtedly the deepest. When they heard Yi Zichen was coming with them, they naturally weren't in a good mood. "Is there a problem?" Elder Lin glanced at him. "Ji Yuan is now the God Race's ally. Furthermore, he's not weak. We'll need their strength on this trip. I urge you to behave yourselves when we get there. Don't try anything funny. If I find out, I won't treat you like the God Emperor. You're too forgiving." The Divine Palace of Liberty's over-god shut his mouth. As soon as they brought up Ji Yuan, Yi Zichen and his experts hurried to the Divine Palace of Destruction. Yang Jian and the Great Sage were naturally among them, but the God of Destruction's War Goddess and Rhythm God were also with them. "Elder Lin." Yi Zichen walked up to Elder Lin and nodded. Elder Lin met his gaze and nodded back, then turned to the other overgods. "Let's go." Chapter 1886. Outside the domain. With Elder Lin in the lead, the mighty army of the God Race and Era Alliance headed for the secret realm in an orderly fashion. Behind them, the God Race and Era Alliance gradually drifted further and further away. "Yi Zi, what's wrong?" Yang Jian and the Great Sage approached Yi Zichen. In truth, Yi Zichen had originally intended for them to stay behind and guard the Era Alliance. The way he saw it, the Era Alliance might be safer than the unknown secret realm. He didn't want his two best friends to go into danger with him. Unfortunately, he had underestimated Yang Jian and the Great Sage's determination. He had also underestimated their brotherly bond. Yi Zichen was gone. How could they possibly live comfortably in the Era Alliance? They'd persisted, but in the end they'd come. To them, no matter how dangerous the secret realm was, as long as they had their brothers by their side, that was enough. When Yi Zichen saw his two brothers' concerned expressions, he put away his solemn expression and smiled. "I wonder when we'll be able to go back." In truth, Yi Zichen's words contained a bit too much information. Where exactly would they go? The Era Alliance? Or the modern realm he'd once lived in? He didn't say it directly. As for his true thoughts, only he knew. "Don't worry about it too much. When the time is right, you'll naturally be able to go back," said Yang Jian in a rare moment of comfort. With that, his expression brightened and he chuckled. "Right now, I'm actually more curious about that secret realm. I really want to see how it connects countless galaxies to the universe. I really want to see what it looks like. If I can see people from other galaxies, then—" "You can shut up." The Great Sage mercilessly cut him off. "If you see people from other galaxies, you're just daydreaming. Can't you at least consider your own worth? With so many big shots looking so grim, you want to see people from other galaxies? Do you want to die? Don't you feel embarrassed talking to me? Aren't our cultivations about the same? I never said I wanted to run into them." The Great Sage rolled his eyes. "Besides, don't forget why we're here. Although we're preventing the outsiders from entering the Milky Way galaxy, it's best if we don't run into them. Or, before we do, we can obtain some treasures to increase our strength. It's better not to share such dangerous thoughts with others. Stop nagging me. Why are you always so talkative?" If nothing went wrong, Yang Jian and the Great Sage would quarrel non-stop after exchanging 3 sentences. Yi Zichen, who'd long since grown accustomed to this, simply smiled silently. The other major experts didn't understand, but since they weren't familiar with each other, they didn't say anything. Furthermore, Elder Lin didn't say anything to stop him, so what right did they have to interrupt him? Star-Lord Yi. At that moment, the God of Destruction Palace's War Goddess arrived beside Yi Zichen. When he saw her, Yi Zichen nodded slightly and returned the greeting. War Goddess, we meet again. Yeah, we meet again. The War Goddess smiled. Now, Star Lord Yi can trust me, right? When I went to tell Star Lord Yi about this, he was still very suspicious. If Her Royal Highness of the angel race hadn't gone to find you, perhaps you wouldn't have come to the god race in the end. Sorry. Yi Zichen didn't have much to explain. It was just as the War Goddess had said. He was very suspicious of her words. If not for the angel race's princess, he really might not have gone. In truth, it wasn't just the War Goddess. Yi Zichen even suspected that the angel race's princess had been acting on her behalf. He'd been suspicious on the way there as well. He couldn't be blamed for this. It was better to be safe than sorry. The relationship between the god race and the era had always been tense. As the era's Star Lord, if he didn't keep an eye on things, he'd be irresponsible to himself and the era. It's nothing. I understand what you did back then. The War Goddess smiled understandingly. Off to the side, the great sage and Yang Jian were still bickering endlessly. They'd gone from arguing about the outsiders to arguing over trivial matters. If he hadn't heard wrong, Yang Jian had just said that the great sage had been a guest at his place yesterday. That was, he'd stolen a lot of his wine. The War Goddess glanced at the two of them, then chuckled. Your two friends are quite spirited. They've always been like this. On the surface, they seem like fire and water, but in private, they're incredibly close. I'm sure the War Goddess has friends like them, right? No. The War Goddess shook her head. Unfortunately, I don't have many friends. Well, Star Lord Yi, you might not know this, but I haven't always lived in the outside. A long time ago, a great war broke out. I was heavily injured and had no choice but to go to another plane to recover. Back then, I might have had a few friends, but after that war, I'm the only one left. I'm the only one left. The War Goddess smiled bitterly and shrugged. That really is terrible news, said Yi Zichen. It's nothing. It's long past. The War Goddess smiled, then looked around. It seems your lover didn't come with you. As for her? I thought this trip was too dangerous, so I left her in the era. Why did the War Goddess mention her? Although Yi Zichen had plenty of lovers, the only one he could think of was Xiaoyumei. The situation in the secret realm was critical, but the era needed someone to lead it. Xiaoyumei was a suitable leader, be it in terms of seeing the big picture or handling matters. As a result, Yi Zichen left her in Chaos City, and let her handle the era's affairs. When she heard that Xiaoyumei wasn't coming with them, the War Goddess's eyes flashed with obvious disappointment. However, she quickly covered it up. Even so, Yi Zichen saw it for an instant. I just thought she was gentle and wanted to get to know her. I never would have guessed the War Goddess liked gentle people. Not bad, Yumei is gentle and considerate. I'm lucky to have her by my side. Yi Zichen smiled, then got straight to the point. What does the War Goddess know about the secret realm? Won't you know everything when we get there? What's the point of asking now? It's always good to know beforehand. Besides, we haven't even arrived yet. Who said that? The War Goddess narrowed her eyes and smiled. She pointed at the enormous black shadow that took up half the sky and shrugged. Aren't we already here? Chapter 1887. This continued until the gods looked away. They either busied themselves with what they were doing or gathered in groups of 2s and 3s to discuss what they had just seen and what they were thinking. Yale still stood in front of the god palace of destruction, looking in the direction that Elder Lin and the others had left. A figure flew over from afar and landed in front of the palace. He knelt on one knee in front of Yale. His eyes were filled with respect and solemnity. Your Majesty. The person didn't say anything else after that. He knelt on the ground quietly and waited for Yale's reply. A long silence lingered in front of the divine palace. The person kneeling on the ground did not know how long he had been kneeling. He could only feel that the sky had darkened. However, Yale did not seem to notice him. It was as if he had been immobilized. He maintained the same posture as he stared at the void. After a long while, Yale finally retracted his gaze. However, he still didn't pay any attention to the person kneeling in front of him. He directly walked into the palace. Seeing Yale enter the divine palace, the person kneeling on the ground thought about it and followed him into the divine palace. "How's the investigation going?" At this moment, Yale finally spoke. The person seemed to want to kneel on the ground again, but Yale stopped him. "Don't mind the customs. Just tell me the results of your investigation." The person in front of the palace stopped what he was doing. He straightened his back and coughed gently. His eyes were filled with seriousness. "Your Majesty, this subordinate went to investigate as you ordered. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you and found the information you wanted to know." "Just say it." Yale didn't seem to have any patience. 3 overgods went to the Emotion God Palace. The God King didn't go with them and stayed behind. 4 overgods went to the God Palace of Destruction and God Palace of Freedom. Jing Rong and Shang Yiming are in charge of the God Palaces. The Qing clan and Wei clan have sent 4 overgods as well, Jianchen said with a smile. As he spoke, the person in front of the palace took out a jade slip. The information of the investigation was imprinted in the jade slip. Quite a lot of people went. Yale, who was on the throne, narrowed his eyes and lightly tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair. It seemed that he was carrying out some kind of scheme in his heart. "How's the situation with the God King?" "The outer perimeter is still guarded by 2 8-winged angels. The Angel King has left the God Emperor Palace for a universe-secret region. However, there are 2 more beings from the past eras outside the Divine Palace. Based on their auras, these 2 seem to be at a higher level than the 8-winged seraphim," the person in the palace replied. "Heh!" Yale snorted softly. If nothing unexpected happened, Ji Yuan's men would stay behind to ensure the Divine Emperor's safety. In that case, there was only one possibility: the Divine Emperor had yet to recover from his injuries. Not only that, but this should also be the result of the discussion between the Angel King, the God Emperor, and the Epoch Star Lord. This also meant that the God Emperor began to be wary of some people of the God race. As for certain people, it was naturally Yale and Orbis. From the looks of it, the Divine Emperor was seriously injured. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done this. One must know that in the face of absolute power, all schemes were useless. If the God Emperor was at his peak, he could completely disregard the Emotion God King and the Destruction God King. No matter how much they plotted against him, he wouldn't care. As for the 2 experts from the past eras, even if Yale didn't see them personally, he knew that they were the remnants of the Second Era. Only they could reach the half-step transcendence realm and above at this time. However, this was nothing. As long as his deity C's seal was up, he could completely ignore the healing and 8-winged seraphim and force his way into the God Emperor Palace. Everything was ready. The only thing left was the deity C's seal. Speaking of which, it was strange. His deity C had been sealed for a long time. It had been more than 2 months since the God race invaded the Second Era. Why did the deity C, which had been sealed for 3 months, still show no signs of being unsealed? Could it be the King of Law? Not long ago, the King of Law came to the God Emperor Palace of Destruction. However, at that time, Yale didn't meet the King of Law. He claimed that he didn't want to meet any guests, so he asked the War Goddess to entertain the King of Law on his behalf. If it was him who sealed his deity C, then at the very least, the 2 of them had to see each other before it could be executed. After thinking about it, Yale discarded this thought. It was most likely because the time wasn't up yet. He always thought that the time was up. It was because of his urgency that he felt that the day of unsealing had arrived. However, even if the day of unsealing hadn't arrived, why couldn't he feel any loosening? Thinking of this, Yale couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. He took a few deep breaths and waved at the people in front of the palace, signaling them to leave. "Your Majesty." The people in the palace didn't leave. Instead, they looked at Yale. "Is there anything else?" Yale asked with an unfriendly expression. "Your Majesty, I'm just curious. The other god palaces and families all sent more than 4 experts. The God Emperor's message also mentioned the importance and disaster of the universe's secret realm. Why did our God Emperor Palace of Destruction only send 2 people? Isn't this a little too little?" Song. Yale suddenly narrowed his eyes and stared at him. "Do you know why I didn't ask the chief gods under me to investigate this, nor did I ask the people of the Qin clan to investigate this? Instead, I chose you, the Song clan leader who has already declined?" "I don't know. During the era of the Darkness God King, the Song clan was one of the peak families of the god race. However, as time passed and many other families rose, the Song clan didn't have any peerless geniuses. Thus, they gradually fell to a third-rate family. When the God King of Destruction first found him, he thought it was a chance for his family to rise again. That was why he was so serious about completing the task given to him. He wanted to use this opportunity to restore his family's glory. However, now that Yale suddenly asked him this question, he didn't dare to answer. Because they also like to ask questions. I don't like people who ask too many questions. As soon as Yale finished speaking, Song An's heart trembled. This subordinate knows his mistake. "Since you know, you can leave." Waving his hand lightly, Song An nodded and left the palace in a panic. However, on his way out, he bumped into someone who had just arrived. At this moment, he didn't dare to say anything. He just nodded at the person and left the palace. At this time, the person who came to the God Destruction Art smiled. "What did you say to him to scare him like this? If I'm not wrong, that person was Song An, right? Why are you here?" Yale's expression wasn't very friendly. "Why? Can't I come uninvited? Even if I came to the god race to rely on him, you don't need to be so hostile towards me. He's already dead." Chapter 1888. This is the universe secret area? Looking at the pitch-black behemoth in front of them, it was a strong visual impact to anyone. Based on its appearance, it looked like a black hole in the chaos of the outer realms. However, even the largest black hole was insignificant compared to it. This black hole directly covered half the sky, and it was a little blurry from here. When he saw this, Yi Zichen couldn't help but gulp. The others did the same. They stared intently at the secret realm for a long time, unable to come to their senses. Don't be in such a hurry to be shocked. This place is still very far away from the universe secret region. The goddess of war's voice brushed past Yi Zichen's ears like a breeze. The great sage and Yang Jian, who had already stopped bickering due to the gigantic figure, couldn't help but open their eyes wide when they heard what the goddess of war said. When he calmed his heart and thought about it, he realized that this was indeed the case. Although the giant shadow he was seeing now wasn't small, it was still somewhat illusory. One could imagine that this universe secret region was still quite a distance away from them. Even so, it was already so huge. If one really arrived in front of the universe secret region, what kind of majestic scene would it be? "All right, let's go." Old Lin, who was walking at the front, shouted to everyone. The experts from the celestial race and the era gathered their thoughts and approached the universe mystic realm with solemn eyes. One had to say that the universe secret region was very far from what they had seen before. An entire hour passed. Although everyone was very cautious along the way, the people here were not mediocre, and their speed could be said to be quite fast. In this 1 hour, they had moved at least hundreds of millions of miles closer to the universe's secret region. The universe's secret region had only become slightly smaller in their vision. It's clearer now. However, he could at least see the outline of the universe secret region. It was still in the shape of a black hole, but there were countless light-colored stripes around it. These stripes crisscrossed with one another, like a fishing net enveloping the center of the black hole. There were also countless buildings around it, towering majestically in the outer realm. Just as everyone was looking around the secret realm, Yi Zichen noticed the seriousness in Elder Lin's eyes. Elder Lin. Yi Zichen walked in front of Elder Lin and looked in the direction Elder Lin was looking. To be honest, he didn't find anything special. It was no different from what he saw at the beginning. There were also some ancient buildings in the black hole. Why do you have such an expression? It seems that the universe's secret realms are very far away from the Outerium God race and the new era. Isn't this a good thing for us? Irresponsible to say, they had passed by at least a few planets on their way here. Yi Zichen had no way of knowing whether or not there were living creatures on those planets until he entered. However, if there were really other races in the universe's secret realms that entered the Milky Way galaxy through the passageway, at least before the Outerium God race and the new era were discovered by them, there would be several planets shielding them from disaster. In this way, the Outerium God race and the Epic era would be able to warn them in advance and make reasonable countermeasures. As for the clansmen living on those planets, they had nothing to do with Yi Zichen. He was merely the era's Star Lord. His job was to ensure the era's safety. The life and death of the other races had nothing to do with him. He was not the master of the galaxy. He did not have that much responsibility. The distance is indeed very far. Elder Lin sighed deeply in confirmation of Yi Zichen's explanation. If that were the case, it would naturally be a good thing for us, but if you have something to say, just say it. At a time like this, there's no point in hiding anything. AI. Helplessness flashed across Elder Lin's wizened face, and his murky eyes filled with worry. Everyone's gaze was attracted by Elder Lin's sigh, and their bright gazes all landed on Elder Lin. After a long while, Elder Lin spoke up. If I remember correctly, this universe mystic realm is in the shape of the central mystic realm. The central secret realm? The center of the universe secret realm? Yi Zichen arched his brows. Old Lin nodded lightly. Looking at the universe secret realm whirlpool and the surrounding buildings, the bitterness on his face intensified. The central mystic area is the center of the universe mystic area. It represents the most central position of the universe mystic area. It is also the place with the highest chance of treasures appearing. Ordinary secret realms are only at the edges. You need to explore before you can enter the central secret realm. That's not good. We can just as easily find some treasures, said Yang Jian. Good my ass. The great sage glared. Don't you understand what Elder Lin is saying? Our clansmen from other galaxies will explore the central secret realm, which means that the central secret realm will be the target of everyone. It's the target of all the secret realms. Our goal here is to stop them from entering the Milky Way. Now that the Milky Way's secret realm has become the central secret realm, the pressure on us in the future will increase severalfold. Only then did Yang Jian realize what was going on. If the central secret realm appeared in a powerful galaxy, it would be an unparalleled blessing to that galaxy. They would be able to enter the center of the secret realm immediately, and their chances of obtaining supreme treasures would be much higher than other clans. The Milky Way's secret realm becoming the central secret realm was a complete disaster for them. Don't be too pessimistic. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Even though the appearance of the center of the secret realm in the Milky Way is troublesome for us, who are weak. However, the secret realm only appears once every 200 eras, and lasts for around 9,000 years. Every galaxy will not send any powerful soldiers. We won't send any powerful soldiers. We'll only send experts when we find the central mystery realm, or when a supreme treasure appears. The central secret realm only has a high chance of having supreme treasures, but that doesn't mean that all of them will appear there. Didn't the Milky Way Master's Bracelet appear in a Grade 3 secret realm? Moreover, it's easier said than done to find the central secret realm from the outer regions. The Milky Way is the central universe's secret realm. The message we received was that the Milky Way galaxy will be safe for at least the first 1,000 years. The war goddess was smiling as she stood in the middle of the crowd and spoke with fervor and assurance. Those from the god race who knew about her were all astonished. Even the god king didn't know about the universe mystic realm, so how did the war goddess know so much about it? Not only that, she even knew where the Milky Way master obtained the bracelet. Chapter 1889. When the God Emperor announced the existence of the Milky Way galaxy, news of the Milky Way galaxy and the Milky Way master were no longer a secret. The Outer Realm's celestial race experts all knew about the master of the Milky Way. However, the universe mystic realm had no idea about the inside story. The goddess of war's calm demeanor made it seem like she was telling the truth. However, as a god of the Outer Realm god race, why did she know so much while the other main god experts did not? Some of them maintained a wait-and-see attitude. They wanted to see if she was telling the truth through Elder Lin. However, when they saw Elder Lin's expression, they knew the goddess of war was telling the truth. From the goddess of war's final words, it wasn't hard to tell that she was betting the Milky Way galaxy's future on him. The era's experts naturally took this as a matter of course. Yi Zichen had already performed far too many miracles for the era's sake. In less than 3 years, he'd gone from an immortal king under the divine mountains to a transcendent expert. If he really had 1,000 years, he might really be able to change the Milky Way galaxy's future. The God race experts were different. They didn't know much about Yi Zichen, and quite a few of them were still hostile to the era. The experts of the Outer Realm god race snorted disdainfully at betting their future on him. However, the safety period of at least 1,000 years allowed them to be mentally prepared. They calmed down a little. In the next 1,000 years, no one could say for sure what kind of fortune they'd encounter and how they'd turn things around. Haha, in the face of the goddess of war's trust, all Yi Zichen could do was laugh dryly. He really didn't know if she was doing this on purpose or if she really had high hopes for him. The universe's central secret realm was a place where countless experts would gather in the future, yet she'd entrusted the future to him. Could it be that this was Yale's plan to use this method to make him feel pressured? But how did she know all this information? Yi Zichen and the God Emperor had been together this entire time. They'd only been separated for a while when he'd returned to the era to dispatch experts. Only Elder Lin and the God Emperor knew about the Milky Way galaxy's past. If they hadn't told the goddess of war, she wouldn't have known so much. Star Lord Yi, I have high hopes for you. Seeing Yi Zichen laugh dryly, the war goddess smiled sweetly. Yi Zichen didn't know why, but when he saw her smile, he suddenly fell into a daze. The goddess of war in front of him seemed to overlap with the little fellow who'd always been imprinted in his heart. Sweet, Yi Zichen almost involuntarily blurted out the name in his heart. But very quickly, he shook his head. When he saw the war goddess, the overlapping figures no longer existed. What am I thinking? How could she be Tian Tian? A bitter smile flashed in his eyes. Could it be that he was starting to miss that little guy? But when he thought about it, Tian Tian really had been separated from them for a long time. Although Yi Zichen had always felt that she was special, the God race's war goddess, the strongest female expert of the God race, didn't seem too likely. Sweet? Star Lord Yi, what did you just say? Asked the war goddess. Oh, what I said just now was heaven. It's an exclamation particle in the modern world. It means to feel very surprised and shocked. The war goddess just placed her bets on me. My scalp went numb, and I couldn't help but sigh. Is that so? It's fine. I believe you can do it. Elder Lin didn't participate from start to finish. All the others could see was the change in his expression. Now that they had at least 1,000 years of safety, the experts of the first era were absolutely at ease. This was especially true of the great sage and Yang Jian. They had absolute faith in Yi Zichen. 1,000 years was absolutely enough for him to grow to a certain height. To put it bluntly, that so-called master of the Milky Way might end up carrying Ye's shoes in 1,000 years. That was what Yang Jian and the great sage were thinking. Although the God race experts weren't so assured, 1,000 years of safety filled them with hope for the future. They all looked forward to obtaining some good fortune in the secret realm and strengthening themselves. That way, when they encountered outsiders, they'd be able to fight back. Elder Lin had to admit that the war goddess was telling the truth. Finding the center of the secret realm on the outskirts was extremely difficult. There were many spatial transfer formations in the secret realm, and reaching the center required luck and countless experiments. It was true that the other galaxies wouldn't send any experts in the early stages of the first era. But all of this was the most idealistic explanation. They didn't have the power to decide the decisions of the other galaxies. They couldn't control the people they sent, or the places they passed through the transfer formations to reach. If Elder Lin didn't want to think about it any further. As a former subordinate of the Master of the Milky Way, he was responsible for protecting the Milky Way galaxy forged by the Master of the Milky Way. There was no reason for him to think about the worst. It was just that he knew too much. Everything the war goddess had said was the best possible outcome. Elder Lin didn't care about what she'd said. He just said she'd deliberately ignored it. Throughout the boundless universe, the secret realms had appeared 17 times. Naturally, the center had appeared 17 times as well. During those 17 times, not a single one of the galaxies the central secret realm resided in had met a good end. All of them had been destroyed. It didn't matter whether they were strong or weak, because the other races in the universe were completely unreasonable. Or rather, they had no reason to reason with you. They didn't belong to the same universe to begin with, so they competed with each other. Destroying any galaxy in the universe would only bring them benefits and no harm. As for the reason they attacked, it was even simpler. It was because the central secret realm was in your universe, so you would definitely have the most treasures. If you were weak, they would force you to hand over all your treasures. If you didn't, you would be destroyed. If you did, you would still 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 be destroyed. If you wanted to resist, those galaxies would attack you together. At that time, no matter how strong you were, a tiger wouldn't be able to fight against a pack of wolves. Back then, the number 1 war god Zhao Xian, the number 3 war god Garen, and the number 4 prince belonged to the German Federation. Didn't they end up being destroyed because of the appearance of the central secret realm? Chapter 1890. In front of the universe secret realm. Due to the war goddess's explanation and Elder Lin's silence, the Milky Way's experts felt less nervous about the other universes and planes. Everyone calmed themselves down and rushed to the universe secret realm again. Along the way, Elder Lin and the extraterrestrial Protoss experts used their divine consciousness to scan their surroundings. Countless divine consciousnesses condensed into an impenetrable net. This was also to prevent the Milky Way's people from other universes from entering the Milky Way and being overlooked, resulting in the Milky Way's destruction. Fortunately, there were no abnormalities in the void's outskirts. Everyone arrived at the universe secret realm safely. This is the universe secret realm. Standing in front of the universe secret realm, Gu Xuanda could no longer contain his emotions and could not help but sigh. The others who came along, whether they were extraterrestrial Protoss experts or great powers from the previous eras, all looked at the majestic scene in front of them in shock. Only when they truly arrived at the universe secret realm could they truly understand how insignificant they were. The pitch-black whirlpool slowly spiraled above the void like a black hole. This black hole seemed to be above this space. Countless elements in the void consciously wandered outside, not daring to approach it at all. The halo of the whirlpool-like black hole gave off a sense of mystery. It seemed to have some sort of magical power. Although no energy was released from it from the outside, Anyone who saw it would unconsciously believe that there was definitely something hidden inside that would make their hearts beat faster. Treasures. Their hearts seemed to be drawn, uncontrollably wanting to walk inside. The area of the black hole covered most of the void. Standing 1,000 meters in front of it, one could not see the end of it as far as the eye could see. Everyone standing in front of it could not help but feel as insignificant as a speck of dust. Wow, it's really big. The great sage, who placed his hand in front of him, flipped his head back and forth to look into the distance. During this time, he even used the Jingu Bang to test the diameter of the black hole. Even when his Jingu Bang could not extend any further, it still could not reach the end of the black hole. This was the Rui Jingu Bang that had once caused havoc in the heavenly court and pierced a hole in the sky. Even it could not reach the end of the black hole. Judging from the full picture they had seen before, just the entrance of this universe's secret realm's black hole should be at least tens of millions of kilometers in diameter. "We can no longer see the buildings we saw before," said one of the god race's master gods. Everyone nodded when they heard this. It was natural that they couldn't see those buildings. Just the entrance of the universe's secret region was enough to block their vision. The buildings were completely in their blind spots, so naturally, they couldn't see them. It was precisely because of the vastness of the universe's secret region that many experts were filled with anticipation. As expected of a universe's secret territory, a secret territory that could cause tens of thousands of galactic races to go crazy over it. Just based on its size alone, it was enough to prove its supreme status within the secret territory. The era was not the only one with mystic realms. The Outerium celestial race had mystic realms too. However, those mystic realms paled in comparison to the universe's mystic realms. There was no comparison at all. A universe secret realm that could give birth to a universe treasure was so huge. Why would they worry about not being able to find a treasure that would interest them? This trip was definitely worth it. These people were the pioneers of the Milky Way to the mystic realm. Before them, no one had ever set foot in this mystic realm. In other words, the secret realm was filled with opportunities and opportunities. Whether they could get it or not was entirely up to them. Sigh, it really is the central secret territory. Before actually arriving at the entrance of the secret territory, Elder Lin's heart was filled with anticipation. He hoped that the Milky Way's universe secret territory would be the central secret territory. The central secret territory was equivalent to announcing the destruction of the Milky Way. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't escape the fate of being destroyed. Even the Dubian galaxy had been destroyed, let alone them, whose Milky Way master had disappeared. However, the truth was right before his eyes. This was undoubtedly the central secret territory. Elder Lin had once followed the Milky Way master to the universe star system where the central secret territory was. He had also entered the universe star system through the universe secret territory's passageway. Even though the Milky Way hadn't participated in the destruction of that universe star system, it had still lent a helping hand. He had personally witnessed the destruction of that universe star system, and had also felt the visual impact of the central secret territory from a close distance. That feeling was no different from the current universe secret territory. Turning back to look at the millions of planets behind him, he really didn't know how long this peaceful scene could last. If someone discovered the existence of the Milky Way through the passageway, it was possible this scene could never be recreated again. King of Laws. At this moment, a cold voice resounded in Elder Lin's sea of consciousness. Just as he was about to raise his head, another voice resounded in his mind. Don't turn back. If others discover you, they'll inevitably overthink things. Among those who had come with him, including the Outerium Celestials and Ji Yuan, there were a total of 4 females. The other females definitely revered the King of Laws. Even if they wanted to talk to him directly, they had to be respectful, not to mention taking the initiative to send him a voice transmission. Their tone even sounded like they were ordering him around. Only one person, that person was the war goddess of the outer realm celestials. Who are you? Why are you so familiar with the history of the universe's secret territory and the Milky Way galaxy? It's impossible for anyone in the Milky Way galaxy to know these things, Elder Lin transmitted without turning back. Who says there isn't? Doesn't the God Emperor know as well? He definitely wouldn't tell you. Elder Lin looked in the direction of the universe's secret domain and purposely concealed his expression so that no one else would notice. From the start, this old man wanted to ask, who exactly are you? You're definitely not someone from the Milky Way galaxy. How did you get here? You and me. Are you my enemy or my friend? Of course I'm your friend. The war goddess crossed her arms and looked at the secret territory like everyone else. As for who exactly I am, you might not believe me even if I tell you. Right now I have no way of telling you. All you need to know is that I have no ill intentions towards you at all. Heh! Elder Lin chuckled, clearly doubtful of her words. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. I've said the same thing to Yizichin. I definitely have no ill intentions towards you. Not only that, I'll give 200% of my sincerity towards the Milky Way galaxy. It's not just your home, it's mine as well, no matter if it's in the past or now. In the past? Elder Lin's sharp senses caught this detail. At the same time, the war goddess also transmitted a message. I took the initiative to find you to tell you not to always frown. If you do, it'll put a huge psychological burden on them. Why don't you? Hey, look. Chapter 1891. A glowing object. Hearing those words, the crowd all looked to the black hole. The great sage and Yang Jian activated their fiery eyes of gold and heaven's eye and stared at the black hole for a long time. There really is a glowing object. After their confirmation, they confirmed that there was indeed a glowing object at the entrance of the black hole. The light didn't look particularly dazzling, as if it was covered by something. It was slightly dim, and had a faint bluish-purple tint to it. Glowing could it be? Noticing the glow, Qingli wanted to say something but stopped herself. However, everyone knew what she wanted to say. Could this light be the birth of a treasure? If that was the case, then their luck was really good. They'd just arrived outside the secret region, and they'd already encountered the birth of a treasure. Elder Lin couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the glow. Based on his experience, this glow meant that a treasure was about to be born. From the glow, it was definitely not an ordinary treasure. After all, this was outside the secret region. They hadn't even entered the inner regions yet. Ordinary treasures wouldn't be too dazzling when they were born, even in the inner regions. Yet, they could see this glow at the outer regions of the secret region. The treasure that was born was at least a precious treasure. There were many types of treasures born in secret regions. The most common were normal treasures. These treasures were on the same level as god weapons or precious pills, talismans or formations. Then there were high-grade treasures. These treasures were similar to the god-bestowed treasures that were bestowed upon ascension. They all had relatively strong attacks or were outstanding in other aspects. Precious treasures. Such a level of excavation was rare even in a universe secret region. Precious treasures contained rich inheritance memories. In other words, obtaining a precious treasure was equivalent to obtaining a precious inheritance. Those who could obtain such treasures, even the most ordinary child, would be able to become an overlord in a short period of time. Finally, there were treasures. These were the most precious treasures in the entire secret region. Even in the central region, they were rare. There was no need to say how precious they were. As long as a treasure appeared, be it offensive, defensive, or support equipment, it would be fought over by countless powerhouses in the universe. The appearance of a treasure was usually followed by a bloodbath. Elder Lin really didn't expect that they would encounter a treasure that was above the level of a precious treasure just after arriving here. If they were lucky enough to get it, looks like we're quite lucky, aren't we? The war goddess chuckled in Elder Lin's mind again. Elder Lin turned around at this moment and coincidentally saw the war goddess smiling at him. I believe you should know how slim the chances are for treasures to be unearthed, even if this is the central mystery realm. Looking at the glow of the treasure, it should be about to be unearthed. We've only just arrived here, and we've already encountered the birth of treasures and above. It's obvious that the universe's secret realms are on our side. The Milky Way side. Elder Lin's eyes flashed with some emotion. Did the universe's secret region really stand on the side of their Milky Way galaxy? Don't look so bitter. Sometimes things aren't as bad as you think, the goddess of war said. If you don't believe me, shouldn't you believe the master of the galaxy? He was the one who created this place. He believed that the Milky Way being recognized by the universe was part of his plan. If he dares. This proved that he had full confidence in his ability. In that case, what else do you have to worry about? The war goddess clasped her hands behind her back, then slowly approached the secret realm. Oh, right, are you sure you're not going to make a move? A few of the god race's overlords are already rushing towards the secret realm's entrance. They've never been to the secret realm before. If anything happens to them inside, it'll be an enormous loss to the Milky Way. What? Only at this moment did Elder Lin notice that there were a few more figures speeding towards the entrance of the universe's secret realm. When he saw this, he couldn't help but knit his brows. All of you, stop right there. Little did he know, at a time like this, no one would listen to him. Those god race experts were overgods from the God Palace of Liberty and God Palace of Joy. When they first met up, they didn't really want to be in the same group as Yi Zichen and the others. From the looks of it, Elder Lin was rather close to Ji Yuan. Now that a treasure was about to be unearthed, they weren't in the mood to deal with an old geezer like Elder Lin. All they cared about was the treasure. Elder Lin, should we go in too? At that moment, Yi Zichen walked up to Elder Lin. In truth, some of Ji Yuan's people wanted to seize the treasure as well. When they saw that the god race experts had gotten ahead of them, they didn't want to let them get the upper hand. However, Yi Zichen suppressed any thoughts of seizing the treasure. Even the secret realms beneath the divine mountains were fraught with danger, let alone the secret realms of the universe. They didn't know much about the secret realms, so to be on the safe side, it was best to stick with Elder Lin and the others who knew more about the secret realms. Even if they wanted to split up and fight for the treasure, that could wait until they were more familiar with the secret realms. Let's go. Elder Lin furrowed his brows as his emotions fluctuated. These people from the god race were too eager for quick success. They didn't even know what was inside the universe mystic realm. Just because they felt that there was a treasure, they rushed inside in a rush. I hope there aren't any other races inside. Under Elder Lin's command, the mighty Milky Way Mystic Realm Exploration Army swept into the Mystic Realm. They passed through without any obstructions. The first thing Elder Lin wanted to do was look for the God Race expert. However, as far as the eye could see, there was nothing but primal chaos. Furthermore, the glowing object from before had disappeared. Where did the treasure go? Yang Jian and the great sage looked around. Everyone else looked confused as well. Did we get teleported somewhere else? No, the entrance is the entrance. It will never. Elder Lin narrowed his eyes and only spoke half of his sentence before he forcefully swallowed the rest of his words and glared. Not good. Elder Lin, what's wrong? Yi Zichen asked subconsciously, but Elder Lin pushed Yi Zichen behind him. Before long, in the primal chaos of darkness, Yi Zichen smiled. The emerald-green extraterrestrial creature waved at them with a smile on his face. In his palm was a bluish-purple gem. The light from the gem was the same as what they had seen from outside earlier. When they saw him, everyone's expressions froze. Everyone's nerves were taut as they stared at the alien in front of them. This was an alien from the universe. Chapter 1892. Everyone stared at the alien creature in front of them. Its jade-green skin was oily and shiny, and there was a white horn on its head. It was only 2 meters tall, and the bluish-purple gemstone in its hand seemed abnormally huge. Faint light shone from the gemstone, giving everyone a dreamy feeling. Did he take the treasure? Or could it be that this treasure was actually a bait that he had released? Everyone's hearts were filled with questions, but what they cared about the most was, why did he enter the Milky Way's central secret realm? The war goddess swore that it would take at least 1,000 years of exploration to enter the central secret realm from the border secret realm. But now everyone looked towards the war goddess. They all wanted an explanation. But all they saw was the war goddess's normal expression, as if she wasn't surprised at all by the appearance of an alien. She didn't care that the words she just said were overturned just like that. He's an alien? Yang Jian frowned and sent a mental message to the great sage. While looking at the alien, Yang Jian subconsciously compared his height with him. Yang Jian was tall and burly. In the heavenly palace, he was considered one of the taller and more burly people. By rough comparison, this alien only reached his waist. He looked really small, and people felt like they could flick him away with a finger. But a guy like this gave off a dangerous aura, suppressing Ji Yuan and the other experts of the god race. They didn't dare to move. I don't know if he's an alien or not, but the gemstone in his hand looks like a treasure. I like it. The great sage's eyes flashed. He didn't hide the light at all as he stared at the gemstone. You like it? Then let's snatch it. Yang Jian laughed. Yang Jian and the great sage were really too familiar. Before the great sage converted to Buddhism, they'd fought over 100 times. After converting to Buddhism, the great sage didn't like the seclusion of Buddhism, so he stayed in the Sky Palace. The two of them interacted even more closely. Ever since they'd caused havoc in the Sky Palace, the great sage was someone who wanted to snatch any treasure he saw. Looking at the great sage's eyes, Yang Jian knew what he was thinking. We'll definitely snatch it. I just don't know what this gem is capable of. We'd better be careful and not fall for its tricks. What's more, we'll have to wait for Yi and the others to decide. Although he said this, the great sage's eyes burned with passion. That's true. Yang Jian and the great sage chuckled, then stopped talking. However, they were both thinking about how they could get their hands on the treasure. The others were not as open-minded as them. They had never seen a race before, so they subconsciously thought that this was a race from outside the universe. It was easy to imagine the pressure brought to them by an unknown race and environment. Many experts of the Outerium celestial race tensed up as they carefully sized up the creature in front of them. They also extended their divine senses to see if there were any helpers in the surroundings. It doesn't feel like a race from outside the universe. Qingli narrowed her eyes and frowned as she pondered. Gu Xuanda turned to look at her and heard her speak again. My father once told me about this form of creature. I think it's a creature from a plane other than the celestial race. However, there are fewer creatures in that plane, and they are very gentle, so the Outerium celestial race doesn't need to be wary of them. Sister Qingli is right. There are records about them in the race, and I've read about them in the ancient books. At this moment, 3 people appeared beside Qingli and Gu Xuanda. The one who spoke was a man in a blue robe. Behind him stood a man and a woman in green. The two of them looked at Qingli and Gu Xuanda with curiosity. The girl, in particular, looked at Qingli with admiration. You guys, Gu Xuanda glared at them. The blue-robed man took a step back and cupped his fist. Brother-in-law, I'm Qing Feng. These two are my twin sisters and younger brothers, Qinglian and Qingji. We're Qinghua's children, so we're considered Sister Qingli's sisters-in-law. Uncle Hua has a family too. Qingli smiled. Gu Xuanda enjoyed being addressed as brother-in-law by Qing Feng, so he was much more polite to Qing Feng. Haha, Uncle Hua's children, no wonder. The Qing clan hated Gu Xuanda so much that they gnashed their teeth. Gu Xuanda was notorious in the clan. Qing Hua was the only one who treated Qingli like his own child, since he was Qingli's biological brother. He was the only one in the clan who had a better impression of Gu Xuanda. Blue robes, green robes. The three of you don't look old, but you've already reached the lord level, said Gushwanda. Brother Feng is talented. We're just a little short of becoming a high god. Yes, Brother Feng is the most talented person in the Qing clan recently. No one can. Little sister, don't talk nonsense. Qing Feng glared at Qinglian. How can I compare to my brother in terms of talent? Judging from his tone, it seemed like there was some kind of conflict within the Qing clan, and they seemed to be avoiding the topic. Qinglian lowered her head and said nothing. Gu Xuanda and Qingli looked at each other. They understood each other's thoughts from the look in each other's eyes. Without asking any further, Gu Xuanda changed the topic right away. What do you mean by people from other planes? Is this fellow a being from the Milky Way? Yes, it's recorded very clearly in the Jade Scroll. That means he's a friend and not an enemy? This. Qingfeng hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. I can't be sure. Moreover, with your experience, you should be able to make a judgment. Of course he could. From the aura released by this being, his eyes, and various other aspects of his behavior, they were all signs of hostility. The Green Rain clan. At this moment, the war goddess also revealed the identity of the clansmen in front of them. When the Outer Realm Protoss experts heard about this clan, memories of this clan suddenly surfaced in their mind. Allies. Haha, I didn't expect the brothers from the Green Rain clan to be faster than us. Someone from the god race had already approached the Green Rain clansmen, as if they were very familiar with each other. However, there was a hint of ruthlessness in his laughter. The strongest expert of the Green Rain clan was only a high god. In other words, this Green Rain clan member was at most a high god. However, the gemstone in his hand was a precious treasure. Humans were greedy. It was the same for the Protoss. How could such a treasure fall into the hands of the Green Rain clan? This was simply letting this precious treasure be covered in dust. He decided to rescue this precious treasure and find a new owner for it. Little did he know. Who's your brother? Chapter 1893. Without any warning, the Overgod expert knelt in front of the Green Rain clansman devoutly. He propped his hands on the ground like a pug and moved his body over. As he kissed the Green Rain clansman's feet, he even raised his head and waited for the caress. How obedient! The Green Rain clansman stroked the Overgod's hair in front of everyone. The Overgod revealed an expression of enjoyment and smiled contentedly. The chief gods of the Outer Realm were all furious. The actions of the Green Rain clan were completely trampling on the dignity of the Outerium celestial race. This was a provocation to the Outerium celestial race. Monkey, that gem is indeed a treasure. While the Overgods were furious at the Green Rain clansman's actions, Yang Jian and the Great Sage had already gathered together to discuss the gem. Although the Overgods were allies with the New Era, they weren't that close to the New Era's people. The Overgods felt that it was an insult, but the New Era's people cared more about the gem in the Green Rain clansman's hand. Is there any treasure that I, old son, have set his eyes on bad? The Great Sage's gaze wasn't as calm as before. The gem in the Green Rain clansman's hand was indeed a treasure, but it was also very evil. Even though he didn't like the Overgods, his strength had to be acknowledged by the Great Sage and the others. In the blink of an eye, without any warning, he could make a deity expert lose his mind and become his dog. Even the Great Sage felt his scalp go numb at this sort of mental manipulation. He was worried that if he showed too much, he would become like the Overgods. If that really happened, he might as well die. Let's be careful. That gem should be able to control people's minds. If you fall for it, I won't be able to save you, said Yang Jian. You don't have to tell me that. As Yang Jian and the Great Sage conversed, the other era's experts, such as Gu Xuanda and Qingli, and the Overgods of the Overgods, were all discussing the gem in the Green Rain clansman's hand. More importantly, they could see the Green Rain clansman's performance. They could also affirm that this dimensional race, which the Outerium god race had once deemed as a non-threat, was definitely not their partner. This guy wanted to enslave everyone here. Go to the back and wait. The Green Rain tribesman waved his hand at the Master God, who crawled behind him. At the same time, the people of the Green Rain race smiled as they looked at the alliance between the God race and the new era. The gemstone in their hands flickered with a strange, bewitching light. Do you want to become enemies with the Outer Realm God clan? The war goddess looked at the Green Rain clan member with a smile. His actions just now didn't seem to affect her at all. Do you know that it was the God race who let you go back then? That's why the Emerald Rain clan has been able to survive until now. Not only did you not repay their kindness, you even attacked the Master Gods of the Outer Realm God race. The few Master Gods who came in earlier must have fallen at your hands. War Goddess. The Green Rain clansman laughed. You know me? The War Goddess raised her eyebrows. How could I not know? The Green Rain clansman twisted his neck and looked at the War Goddess. It was unknown what color was flickering in his eyes, but in short, his gaze made people feel very uncomfortable. The strongest female expert of the Outer Realm God race, a combination of beauty and wisdom. Your reputation in our Green Rain race is quite well known. You're no weaker than a God Emperor. Should I feel honored? Asked the War Goddess. The Green Rain clansman shrugged, indicating that this had nothing to do with him. He didn't care if he felt honored or not. He was simply stating a fact. If you leave now, I can let you go. After a while, the Green Rain clansman suddenly spoke up. Let me go? Then the others. Naturally become my slaves, our Green Rain clan's slaves, said the Green Rain clansman arrogantly. Shameless boasting. Several of the Outer Realm God races overgods roared. The Green Rain clansman narrowed his eyes. The gem in his hand flashed, and one of the Outer Realm God race overgods lost his mind. He knelt on the ground like the previous Master God, crawled over like a dog, and wagged his tail. Everyone's hearts trembled, especially those who'd stood beside the overgod. Their eyes flickered with terror, and when they looked at the gem, their gazes were filled with terror. Easy. Yang Jian and the Great Sage were stunned by the gem's evil nature. They couldn't help but transmit to Yi Zichen. At first, they'd thought that only by getting close to the gem could their souls be controlled. But now it seemed that the gem's range of control far exceeded their imaginations. Everyone, don't move recklessly. Focus and calm your minds. If you have any soul-protecting divine artifacts, hurry up and take them out. If I'm not mistaken, this gem can control a person's soul. As for how it can be used, I'm not too sure. The era's experts nodded with stern expressions and formed several defensive barriers between each other. When the Outer Realm God race experts saw this, they followed suit. At that moment, the Green Rain clansman, who just subdued another overgod, laughed. Don't try to deceive yourselves. Even if you do this, do you really think you can resist the light of souls? With that, he turned to the War Goddess. This is the last chance I'm giving you to leave. If you don't leave now, you really might not be able to. You really dare make an enemy of the Outer Realm God race? Shouted the Outer Realm expert. If we hadn't spared you, would you? If the God Emperor and His Excellency the Divine King found out, you... Shut up, you filthy swine! Roared the Green Rain clansman, glaring at them savagely. You talk all about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, but didn't you just try to steal my soul gem? Those people who just came in, didn't they all want to rob us of our gems? And you... The Green Rain clansman suddenly pointed at the overgod and snorted. Also, don't tell me anything. It was your Outer Realm God race that spared us. You let us go, but didn't we pay the price? You plundered the entire planet's resources. Do you know how many of our clansmen starved to death in the past 100 years? The Green Rain clansman's eyes were bloodshot, his expression savage. I have been waiting for you all here to avenge my clansmen who have died tragically. You will all be slaves of the Green Rain clan, dogs of the Green Rain clan. Suddenly, Yi Zichen reached out and grinned at the Green Rain clansman. Chapter 1894. What was he plotting now? Those familiar with Yi Zichen couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking and why he was acting this way. Yi Zi, you've thought of something again. Yang Jian and the great sage looked at each other and nodded. They'd interacted with Yi Zichen the most. They'd practically done the same thing, and had experienced far too much together. Under normal circumstances, Yi Zichen would already be thinking of something else. However, this time, Yi Zichen didn't signal them with his eyes, so they didn't know what to do. They had no choice but to wait for Yi Zichen to send them a signal. Everyone else was dumbfounded. They looked at Yi Zichen in astonishment. The Outlander experts were already seething with rage. They glared at Yi Zichen and cursed him with words Yi Zichen had never heard before. The Green Rain clansman froze, then looked back and forth between the Outlander god race and the Era. The expression on his face changed from the initial astonishment to a mocking smile. You want to take this opportunity to call for reinforcements? The Green Rain clansman sneered disdainfully, then shook his head with the satisfaction of a victor. You can't leave. Hey bro, don't let your imagination run wild. I really do want to retreat. Our relationship with the Outlander god race isn't as good as you think. There are plenty of them who want to destroy our era too. Yi Zichen smiled wryly and shrugged. I can tell you're quite capable. When the universe's secret realms invade the Milky Way, I'll leave the defense to you. I don't think it'll be a problem. With that, Yi Zichen gestured at the era experts to gather around him. Yi Zichen maintained his flattering smile, and the corners of his mouth curled up. What do you think? The Green Rain clansman sneered even louder. He didn't seem to be listening to Yi Zichen at all. You want to use the universe's secret realms to pressure me? Bro, I really didn't mean that. Yi Zichen protested. Don't worry about what you think. You can't leave. I've already said that everyone here will become the slaves of our Green Rain race. Everyone, including all of you. The soul gem in his hand glowed with a strange light. If I'm not mistaken, that guy with a hairy face and a thunderous mouth, as well as the average-looking guy next to him, were also greedy for my soul gem. Who are you calling ugly? Yang Jian was furious. Everyone knows who you're talking about. The Green Rain clansmen sneered at Yang Jian. Their intentions were clear. Xiao Budian suddenly, the three-pointed, double-edged blade appeared in Yang Jian's hand. The great sage hurriedly pulled him back. Yang Jian took a deep breath, glowered at the Green Rain clansman, and transmitted his voice to Yi Zichen. Yi Zi, just tell me what your plan is. Yang Jian was most confident in his looks, especially the people around him, which made him even more confident in his looks. The reason why the third princess could become his immortal companion was largely due to her handsome British face and her interesting soul. This Green Rain tribesman actually said that his looks weren't that great. He absolutely couldn't tolerate it. Elder Lin and the war goddess also glanced vaguely at Yi Zichen to see what he was up to. Little did they know. Yi Zichen's face was filled with disappointment. Yi Zichen really did want to leave. At a time like this, if he had a plan, he'd naturally tell everyone. From the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to stay here any longer. The soul gem in the Green Rain clansman's hands was too evil. Just now, those two overgods had become his lackeys. Even now, Yi Zichen had no idea how they'd done it. Although he wasn't weak, his soul defense was as fragile as paper. He had so many divine artifacts, but none of them were effective against the soul. There was also Soul Pearl Yuan. Ever since he'd given it to his aunt, Lady Providence, to modify, he didn't know if she'd forgotten or something, but she still hadn't given him the finished product. It could be said that Yi Zichen's current soul defense was 0. As long as this evil soul gem was used on him, he would fall for it. Yi Zichen was well aware of his own weight. He couldn't afford to be as reckless as before. He needed to think carefully and ensure his own safety. Only when he was safe could the new era have a future. But now... He couldn't leave. If they didn't let him, then he wouldn't leave. However, he remembered every single one of those outsiders who'd hurled insults at him. When he had the time, he'd have to teach them a lesson. The great sage, who'd been paying close attention to Yi Zichen's expression the entire time, seemed to notice something amiss. After Yang Jian's repeated questions, the great sage resolved the situation. What other plan could there be? Kill them and steal their treasures. Before he'd even finished speaking, the great sage's Rui Jingu Bang transformed into a massive staff. Countless afterimages descended from the sky and smashed into the Green Rain clansmen. Screw them! His good brother, the great sage, was taking action. Yang Jian wasn't afraid of trouble. He opened his celestial eye and followed the afterimages with his three-pointed, double-edged sword. It had to be said that their surprise attack was very effective. Although the Green Rain clansmen's soul gems were strong, it was obvious that they were struggling to defend against the great sage and Yang Jian's continuous attacks. From this, it was clear that they weren't particularly strong. They were relying on the power of their gems. The experts of the Outer Realm God race noticed this and joined the battle against the Green Rain race. The Green Rain clansmen were already at a disadvantage. When they saw more people attacking, their soul gems flashed, and several overgods appeared at the entrance to the secret realm. As for these overgods, they were all outsiders who'd rashly entered the secret realm at the start. War Goddess, you're not leaving? To everyone's surprise, the Green Rain clansmen still had the energy to ask questions. The War Goddess shook her head and chuckled. The Green Rain clansman sighed. What a pity. In that case, stay behind. You're still in the mood to hit on girls? Die. Yang Jian's 3 eyes opened wide, and he was like a god descending to the mortal world. Just as he was about to succeed, an overgod appeared in front of him. How troublesome. The Green Rain clansman shook his head, then fixed his gaze on Yi Zichen. It looks like you're their leader, right? Star Lord Yi. Although Gu Xuanda and Yi Zichen weren't on good terms, he sensed danger approaching. He set aside their grudges and stood in front of Yi Zichen. Ha! How could you possibly resist the power of the soul? Chapter 1895. In practically an instant, Yang Jian and the great sage stopped their attack. When they saw Yi Zichen's dazed expression, the Era Yuan experts panicked. He looked just like the overgods from before. In less than a breath of time, the Green Rain clansmen had taken control of Yi Zichen's mind. Yi Zi! Yang Jian and the great sage wanted to step forward and pull him back, but there were still a few outworld overgod puppets by their side, so they couldn't leave at all. Even as they stopped, the two of them were heavily injured. Star Lord Yi! Don't move! Just as Gu Xuanda was about to step forward, the gem in the Green Rain clansman's hands flashed once more. Both the God race and the Era Yuan were afraid of this light. So long as it flashed, it meant another person's mind was under its control. Who could it be? The Green Rain clansmen looked around solemnly. So long as they were still conscious, it meant they weren't the target. Lil Li. Suddenly, the Era Yuan heard Gu Xuanda's voice tremble as he called out her name. Soon after, everyone looked to his side Qingli. This time, the one the Green Rain clansman had targeted was none other than Qingli, one of the ancient race's 3 half-step transcendence experts. Clan sister. The 3 elders of the Qin clan also shouted anxiously. I was right. Both of them hold a high position in the hearts of all of you. The people of the Green Rain race smiled as they looked at the various expressions on the faces of the people in front of them. Some were angry, some were afraid, some were worried. All sorts of emotions converged, and in the Green Rain clansman's eyes, it was like a good show. Don't even think about stopping them, got it? Right now, a single thought from me will be all it takes for their souls to scatter. If you want to stay, then so be it. That one sentence caused everyone who'd wanted to stop Yi Zichen and Qingli to freeze in place. All they could do was watch helplessly as the two of them walked up to the Green Rain clansman. There was no sunlight in the secret realm, but there were likely glowing objects inside that prevented people from entering complete darkness. However, black was still the main color of the secret realm. This was a world of darkness, accompanied by this scene. An inexplicable pressure lingered in everyone's hearts. Gu Xuanda clenched his fists and looked at Qingli's back view with reddened eyes. Yang Jian and the great sage gritted their teeth and forced themselves to return to the great era's army. Yi Zichen and Qingli walked slowly. Perhaps because their souls had just been controlled, the people of the Green Rain tribe weren't very proficient in controlling their souls. Thus, it took them more than 10 minutes to travel a distance of 100 meters. He walked up to the Green Rain clansman. Yi Zichen and the others stared at him with lifeless eyes. The Green Rain clansmen reached out and gently rubbed their heads. How obedient! A satisfied smile appeared on the faces of the Green Rain clansmen. When Yang Jian and the other experts from the other era saw this, they clenched their fists and gritted their teeth, but they couldn't do anything. "All right, you may leave." The two of them nodded and walked to the side of the Green Rain clansman. They were like two protectors protecting him. Yang Jian's heart tightened as he looked at the silent Elder Lin and transmitted his voice. Elder Lin, please think of a way." Right now, the only person they could rely on was the Master of the Laws, Elder Lin. Yang Jian and the great sage repeatedly transmitted to him. However, their transmissions were like stones sinking into the ocean. They received no response at all. Then they looked at the war goddess. The goddess of the divine race was also silent. It was impossible to tell whether she was happy or angry. Monkey. Yang Jian had never felt so flustered before. It wasn't that they'd never run into danger before, but the situation back then was fundamentally different. Whether it was him, Yi Zichen, or the monkey. No matter who fell into trouble, the remaining two were confident they could overcome it. This time, it was Yi Zichen. The Green Rain clansman had used a soul gem to control his soul. I understand. Yang Jian didn't know what the great sage knew, but he watched in bewilderment as the great sage took a few steps forward. Everyone else looked at the great sage in astonishment until he reached the Green Rain clansman. By now, the other Green Rain clansmen had returned to his side. They stared intently at the great sage. When they were less than 10 meters apart, the great sage stopped. Then he bowed deeply. "Why are you doing this? Weren't you having fun fighting me just now?" The Green Rain clansmen laughed mockingly, as if they knew exactly why the great sage was bowing. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have coveted your soul gem, nor should I have used violence against you. It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with Yizi." "Monkey!" Yang Jian shouted urgently. "HM?" The Green Rain clansmen's smile grew wider. They arched their brows at the great sage. "Are you regretting it?" "That's right. But what does that have to do with me?" The Green Rain clansman's gaze turned cold. "Don't spout such useless nonsense. Are you afraid your clan will be exterminated?" Suddenly, the great sage's eyes lit up. He looked directly into the Green Rain clansman's eyes. "Do you know who this Yi Zichen is? He's the Lord of the Era, the link between the God race and the Era. Now that you've captured Yizi, the link between the Era and the God race has been severed. The God Emperor can't possibly allow our alliance to break, so he'll definitely go to the Green Rain clansmen and ask for you." "Ha ha." The people of the Green Rain clan suddenly raised their heads and laughed. "You want to threaten me with the Divine Emperor?" If it was in the past, I might have been afraid of him. But now that he's almost a cripple, there's nothing to be concerned about. Not just the God Emperor. The great sage shook his head and pointed at the great expert behind him. "They're just a portion of our era's elites. You might not know how important Yi Zichen is to our era, but he's the most important. However, I can tell you that we will fight to the death with your Green Rain clan for him. Your soul gem is powerful, but that's only because we don't have any defensive artifacts of the same level. If you create this thing, your soul gem will be useless. At that time, Are you afraid of being exterminated? The entrance to the universe's secret realm was silent. This silence was different from before. This time, it was the green rain race that was silent. You? All of this is based on the fact that you can go back. Of course we can. The great sage snorted. Both Yang Jian and I have divine artifacts that protect our souls. I'm sure you know that, right? A single question caused the Green Rain clan to be unable to say anything else. The great sage was telling the truth. Release them? If he released them now, they'd already grasped his weakness. If that happened, how could he escape with the soul gem? At worst. Don't even think about fighting to the death, said the great sage. That's only if you want to exterminate your clan. Then what do you want? Chapter 1896. Monkey! Yang Jian roared anxiously. He never would have guessed the great sage would use such a method to exchange for Yi Zichen's safety. When he saw Yi Zichen's mind being controlled, Yang Jian was extremely anxious. However, he absolutely didn't want to see the great sage trade with him. Yi Zichen and the monkey were both Yang Jian's brothers. They were both flesh and blood. He didn't want to see either of them in danger. Hurry up and come back. We can slowly think of a way to deal with Yi Zi. Yang Jian kept sending messages to the great sage through his divine sense, but the great sage had completely cut off their connection. His golden eyes were filled with an oppressive aura as he stared into the eyes of the Green Rain clansman. What do you think? Are you going to trade or not? The great sage muttered. The Green Rain clansman knit his brows, unable to respond. What a joke! Whether it was in terms of cultivation or status, Yi Zichen and Qingli were both much higher than the Green Rain clansman. No matter how he looked at it, the Green Rain clansman was at a disadvantage. But judging from the current situation, if he didn't make the trade, things wouldn't end well. How did things turn out like this? The Green Rain clansman didn't understand. He clearly had the absolute advantage. When the secret realm appeared in the Milky Way, he'd been wandering the Milky Way's primal chaos in search of a breakthrough when he discovered it. That wasn't all. He'd personally witnessed the heavily injured God Emperor. Filled with suspicion, he'd entered the depths of the secret realm and coincidentally discovered the soul gems. After fusing with the soul gems, he deeply understood their strength and guessed the meaning of the secret realm's existence. This was a secret realm where secret treasures were unearthed. As he considered this, he continued to wander around the entrance of the secret realm in hopes of obtaining more treasures. He didn't dare venture deeper because he was worried there were dangers he couldn't handle. He knew his cultivation wasn't high, and he could only rely on soul gems. Only by relying on soul gems could he explore the borders of the secret realm in peace. At the same time, he waited for the gods of the outer realm to arrive. He imagined that once the gods of the outer realm arrived, they'd be able to control a few over-god experts so that he could rely on them to explore deeper. At the same time, he could avenge the deaths of the Green Rain clansmen who'd plundered their resources. Half a month he wandered around here for a full half a month's time. The Outerium divine race finally arrived. Nothing unexpected happened. He just released a bit of the light from the soul gem, and it attracted the attention of several main god. He couldn't sense any goodwill from them. They were just out to steal the treasures. It was just like how they had plundered the resources of the Green Rain race in the past. There wasn't the slightest bit of humanity to speak of. With the power of the soul gem, the people of the Green Rain race were able to control those core gods without feeling threatened at all, turning them into their slave puppets. Even if the Milky Way galaxy's exploration army attacked, they would still have the absolute advantage in numbers. The members of the Green Rain clan didn't reveal any cowardice. What was there to be afraid of? No matter how many people came, it would only increase the number of his slave puppets. Why did he feel like he was at a disadvantage now? With the soul gem, no one could break free from the soul gem's control. He was very confident, but he just had to run into the great sage and Yang Jian. When the great sage had looked at the soul gem greedily, he had thought of turning him into a puppet. He had failed. Even after activating the power of the soul gem, the great sage still maintained his consciousness. It wasn't just him. The three-eyed fellow beside him was the same. One reason was that he couldn't sense the existence of his soul. The other was that his soul was protected. There was no flaw whatsoever. It was precisely because of this that the Green Rain clan felt apprehensive. If he answered the great sage's question, was he afraid of being exterminated? Of course he was. Of course he was afraid. It was this sort of fear that prevented him from acting as unbridled as before. He was worried that Yang Jian and the great sage would return to the ancient era and contact the god race to deal a fatal blow to the Green Rain clan. He'd wandered the primordial chaos for the sake of breaking through and making the Green Rain clan stronger and safer. If the existence of the Soul Gem or Yi Zichen and Qingli led to the destruction of the Green Rain clan, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. That wasn't his original intention. Have you thought it through? Do you want to be exterminated or do you want to trade? The great sage narrowed his eyes and continued to exert pressure on the Green Rain clan. In truth, he was gambling. What kind of soul-protecting divine artifact could resist the Soul Gem's control? He was just making things up. The ancients were so wealthy. How could Qingli not have a soul-protecting divine artifact? At their level, they feared soul attacks the most. How could the god races over gods not get themselves a set of soul-protecting divine artifacts? In the end, they'd still been controlled. Soul gems could obviously penetrate the soul's protection and take control of the soul. Either that, or the artifact they wore wasn't strong enough. However, they were already peak existences of the ancient era and the god race. Naturally, a soul-protecting divine artifact they could wear was the best. If even this sort of artifact wasn't strong enough, then even if Yang Jian and the great sage returned to the ancient era, they wouldn't be able to do anything. The great sage couldn't be controlled because he was a stone monkey raised by the heavens. There was no such thing as a soul. As for Yang Jian, his third eye was a gift from the heavens. Its existence could protect his divine sea. It could be said that the two of them were special. The great sage continued to pressure the Green Rain clansmen in order to instill fear in their hearts and release Yi Zichen and Qingli. He believed that if Yi Zichen recovered his senses, he'd definitely have a way to save him. Have you thought it through or not? No matter how I look at it, using you in exchange for the two of them is a loss. I want the two of you in exchange for the two of them. The Green Rain clansman suddenly pointed at Yang Jian. 2 for 2? What do you think? It's very fair. Suddenly, the great sage's gaze darkened. Fair? The great sage could tell at a glance what the Green Rain clansmen were thinking. Only he and Yang Jian couldn't control the Green Rain clansmen's soul gems. If the two of them voluntarily became their slaves, then he wouldn't have to worry about anything else. He wouldn't have to. Whether or not he kept his promise was naturally up to him. He could release Yi Zichen and the others, then use the soul gems to control the others again. Perhaps Yang Jian had considered this possibility as well, so he didn't immediately agree to the Green Rain clansman's demands. Although he didn't know what the monkey was thinking, he was keenly aware that he had an important position in this negotiation. An extremely important position. It seems there's no room for negotiation? The great sage narrowed his eyes. Ha, you're the one who didn't want to negotiate properly from the start, aren't you? If we use you in exchange for the two of them and let them go, won't our Green Rain clan suffer a fatal blow all the same? Sneered the Green Rain clansman. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. Not everyone is an idiot. With that, the soul gems in the Green Rain clansman's hands suddenly flared with light. So what if I can't control the two of you? As long as I control the others and kill you, won't it all be over? The gazes of the god race experts and the experts of the first era trembled. They did everything they could to protect their minds. In practically an instant, the great sage raised his staff and swung it viciously at the soul gems in an attempt to shatter them. However, at that moment the blinding light suddenly vanished. The great sage, who'd raised his staff into the air, froze, then chuckled. Chapter 1897. Gentle laughter rang out in everyone's ears. When they looked in the direction of the sound, they saw that it was none other than Yi Zichen, clutching the soul gem in his hand and smiling at the Green Rain clansmen. Qingli and the other overgods were still under the soul gem's control. How he'd managed to break free was something no one else knew. Yi Zi, Yang Jian and the great sage were delighted. The great sage, who'd been suppressing the Green Rain clansmen with his gaze, ran straight to Yi Zichen's side. He'd already prepared for the worst. He never would have guessed that Yi Zichen, who'd been under his control, would be able to regain consciousness. As for the Green Rain clansmen, the great sage no longer cared. Now that he'd lost the soul gem, he'd lost everything he could rely on. He hadn't even reached the higher god level yet. In a place filled with overgods, his status had fallen to the level of an ant. "You're actually fine." At that moment, Yang Jian also ran over and patted Yi Zichen's shoulders. He'd been frantic just now, especially when the monkey said he'd trade himself for Yi Zichen's return. "You damned monkey, why are you trying to be a hero?" Yi Zichen glanced at the great sage and Yang Jian. Judging from the great sage's expression and quivering lips, they were about to argue again. Yi Zichen smiled and walked past them, then walked up to the Green Rain clansmen with the soul gem in hand. The Green Rain clansmen were in a panic. Their bodies trembled violently. The soul gem had been stolen. Not only that, but someone had cut off his connection with the gem. The soul gem no longer belonged to him at all. How did this happen? He'd clearly controlled Yi Zichen's mind. He could clearly sense the imprint on his soul. That was why he dared let Yi Zichen stand by his side. Why had he suddenly broken free of the soul gem's binding? The binding had instantly snatched away his soul gem and erased all connection between him and the gem. "You!" The Green Rain clansmen suppressed their trembling hearts, pointed at Yi Zichen, and glared at him. However, they didn't dare say anything too overboard. After much hesitation, that was all they could say in the end. The soul gem's light grew dimmer and dimmer in Yi Zichen's hand. It wasn't that Yi Zichen didn't know how to use soul gems. Rather, he was doing it on purpose. He waited until the gem no longer shone, until it became completely ordinary. Amethyst Ball. The sovereigns under the control of the soul gem, as well as Qingli, all regained their wits. Thinking about everything that had happened before and seeing who the soul gems belonged to, these people could roughly guess who had released their souls. Gu Xuanda nodded towards Yi Zichen gratefully, then charged towards Qingli. The other overgods, even those who'd previously held enmity towards Ji Yuan, couldn't help but feel a great deal less hostile towards Yi Zichen. No matter what, Yi Zichen had given them a new life. Of course, most of them kept their gratitude to Yi Zichen in their hearts. Their pride prevented them from actually running over to Yi Zichen to thank him. All they could do was make a mental note to repay him in the future. However, their hatred towards the Green Rain clansmen was undisguised. Countless resentful gazes and auras bore down on the Green Rain clansmen from all directions. He stood at the center of the crowd, trembling uncontrollably. After losing the soul gem, all that was left was boundless terror. If it were them. He glanced at the war goddess and Elder Lin. Earlier, when Yi Zichen was under their control, they hadn't reacted in the slightest. Now that Yi Zichen had obtained the soul gem and reversed the situation, they merely smiled faintly. From this, it was clear that they'd known this would happen from the start. They knew the soul gem couldn't bind Yi Zichen? Why on earth was that? The Green Rain clansman mulled it over. When he'd controlled Yi Zichen's soul, he'd imprinted it clearly. The only thing he found strange was that Yi Zichen's soul didn't seem complete. At the time, he hadn't paid it much attention. Could it be that Yi Zichen had broken free because of his missing soul? Yi Zi, this guy's a scourge. Controlling the others is one thing, But he even dared to do it to you? The way I see it, if there's no other way, we should just get rid of him. Without the soul gem, you don't even need to do anything. I'll send him to hell on his own. Cursed Yang Jian. The Green Rain clansman instinctively gulped and curled up into a ball. He was truly flustered. Just now, Yang Jian hadn't been spouting nonsense. Without the soul gem, the Green Rain clansman was like a soft persimmon. Anyone could squeeze it. Yi Zichen raised his hand to signal Yang Jian not to be too impulsive, then slowly walked up and patted the Green Rain clansman on the shoulder. When he did, Yi Zichen sensed the Green Rain clansman's body stiffen. However, this wasn't incomprehensible. No matter what, the Green Rain clansman's life was now in Yi Zichen's hands. In truth, the soul gem being in my hands is actually a good thing for you. After a while, Yi Zichen looked at the Green Rain clansman and finally spoke. An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. I don't know if you understand this or not. You don't have enough strength. Having such a precious treasure isn't a blessing, it's a disaster. Like now, without the soul gem, you have nothing to rely on. About you. Everything about you no longer belongs to you. What do you want? I don't want anything. I just want to let you go. As soon as he said that, the Green Rain clansmen, God Race, and Era experts all revealed confused expressions. Yi Zi, you want to let him go? Shouted Yang Jian. Yi Zichen smiled and nodded. What right do you have to let him go? Just now, he insulted the dignity of the God Race. We have to kill him and use his blood to. What right do you have to lecture me? Before the God Race expert could finish his sentence, Yi Zichen coldly cut him off. The soul gem in his hand flashed with light. I'm still not particularly comfortable with this gem. Do you want me to practice on you? Gulp. The God Race expert instantly fell silent. They were truly frightened by the soul gem. Even if they died, they didn't want to experience what had just happened again. Yi Zichen had intimidated the God Race. He was the Lord of the Era, so the Era experts naturally wouldn't say anything against him. Besides, the Era experts hadn't suffered any losses over the soul gems. You can go now. Chapter 1898. The people of the Green Rain race had never dreamed that they would have this kind of opportunity. Could it be that there were still people who would repay evil with good? When they heard Yi Zichen's words, the Green Rain clansmen grew suspicious. It seemed that the other party had made a request of him, but this request was based on him keeping his promise. If the Green Rain clansmen agreed verbally, then once they returned to their clans, they'd ignore his request. Yi Zichen wouldn't be able to do anything to them. If there really was an invasion from other races in the universe, they probably wouldn't have the energy to care about the Green Rain race's betrayal. Perhaps when the time comes, she might even have to beg him. He didn't think that everything would be as perfect as he imagined. Perhaps Yi Zichen wanted to use some sort of method, soul gem. Suddenly, the hearts of the Green Rain tribesmen trembled. Now that the gem was in Yi Zichen's hands, if he wanted someone to truly be unable to betray him, he naturally had to control their soul. He wanted to. You want to leave an imprint on my soul? Don't even think about it. The Green Rain clansman shouted furiously. Hey, do you see the situation clearly? Yang Jian raised his three-pointed, double-edged sword. The silver sword light drew an arc, and the tip of the sword brushed past the tip of the Green Rain clansman's nose, stopping between his eyebrows. As long as Yang Jian willed it, he could instantly pierce through the forehead of a Green Rain clansman and shatter his soul sea of consciousness, turning him into an idiot. Do you have the right to choose? The cold blade was pressed against his forehead. The heart of the Green Rain clan member fiercely contracted, and his stiff body didn't move at all. He licked his lips and forcefully suppressed the fear in his heart. Then I would rather die. The Green Rain clansman, who had once used soul gems to control others, knew better than anyone else the result of being branded. The power of life and death was completely in the hands of the other party. Even if he lived, he would be like a walking corpse, unable to have his own consciousness. Whatever the other wanted him to do, he would do it. Perhaps it really was the time for the universe to be invaded by alien races. Yi Zichen wanted to use his soul imprint to command the Green Rain clansmen to serve as cannon fodder. If he really did it, he might as well die now. The members of the Green Rain race glared at Yang Jian, refusing to budge an inch. Yang Jian squinted his eyes and lightly pushed his blade forward. "Don't!" A pair of hands abruptly appeared on his shoulders. This abrupt slap caused Yang Jian's hand, which was holding the weapon, to shake violently. Poochie! Blood splattered through the air. Yang Jian glared at Yi Zichen, then at the blade that had sunk into the Green Rain clansman's forehead. The eyes of the Green Rain clansmen were wide open. Even in the face of death, they still maintained an expression as if they were facing death calmly. "Yi Zi, this isn't my fault, right? So you want to say that it's my fault?" Yi Zichen glared at him. "If you didn't pat me, I wouldn't have been scared." Yang Jian helplessly spread his hands. Immediately, the two of them looked at each other and saw a speechless expression in each other's eyes. "Forget it, just die." Yi Zichen didn't dwell on the matter. He glanced at the lifeless Green Rain clansman, then couldn't help but walk up to him and gently stroke his eyes. "Your life is really bad. I really want to let you go." Yi Zichen shrugged, then turned to the powerhouse. "Take care of it and send the corpse back to the Green Rain race. Also, send some more resources to the Green Rain race. Raise a new leader from among the clansmen and have them serve Era." "No problem. Leave it to me," said Gushwanda. It was all thanks to you that Qingli was able to escape. Leave it to me. Just consider it my way of repaying my debt of gratitude." "All right." Yi Zichen nodded. "Then I'll leave it to you. But don't think this is enough to repay you. Qingli is priceless to you, isn't she?" Gu Xuanda, who was just about to leave, couldn't help but stiffen. When he recalled Yi Zichen's words, he couldn't help but curse inwardly. That scoundrel! No one would have guessed that the Green Rain clansman, who'd once held soul gems and posed a great threat to both the God race and Era, would meet such a fate. Dying was one thing, but he died in such a blunder. Without the threat of the Green Rain clansman, the God race experts had already begun exploring the area around the entrance to the secret realm. However, due to the appearance of the Green Rain clansmen, their exploration was limited to within 1,000 meters of the main force. They didn't dare advance rashly. Yang Jian and the Great Sage naturally didn't just stand around. They called out to Yi Zichen, then left to explore the surroundings. Now, only Elder Lin, the war goddess, and Yi Zichen remained at the entrance. "Elder Lin, this is a treasure, right?" Yi Zichen placed the soul gem in Elder Lin's hands. A purple light swirled around it. "It was just a treasure before." Elder Lin nodded with certainty. After fiddling with it a few times, he handed it back to Yi Zichen. "Treasures like this can only be found by chance. Since it's in your hands now, you have to make good use of it." "Of course. I've already thought of how to use it." As he spoke, Yi Zichen explained his plan to Elder Lin and the war goddess. Long after Yi Zichen finished speaking, both Elder Lin and the war goddess furrowed their brows. "If we do that, then the soul gem's effects. I know it'll be greatly reduced, but isn't our goal here to prevent others from entering the Milky Way?" Yi Zichen smiled. "We'll use the soul gem as the eye of the formation and set up a bewildering formation." "We can try," Elder Lin nodded. Although the war goddess still couldn't agree with Elder Lin, she could only nod and shrug. "Then let's try it." With that, she squinted her eyes and looked Yi Zichen up and down. Yi Zichen, who had been paying attention to the soul gem, felt his hair stand on end. "How did you break free from the soul gem's imprint?" The war goddess raised her eyebrows. "When you transmitted your voice to me and Elder Lin, I felt that you were very confident. However, even if the Green Rain clan hadn't used even a tenth of its power, it shouldn't have been so easy. You should have been able to break free in a short amount of time, right?" It's all thanks to him, Yizichin laughed. Yizichin laughed. Suddenly, an elegant young master appeared in front of him. This young master looked exceptionally handsome, and the smile on the corner of his mouth gave people a feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Both Elder Lin and the war goddess were attracted by him. Just as Yizichin was about to introduce him to them, the young master walked in front of the war goddess. His gem-like eyes revealed a hint of struggle, as well as a hint of doubt. Confusion,